American Comics. My universe begins from the inner world. Chapter 41. Deadpool looked at the monster at the end of the incubation zone and couldn't help but gasp. It was a xenomorph that was 5 meters tall, and even just lying on the ground, its huge body exuded a terrifying deterrent. Unlike the smooth, tubular head of a normal xenomorph, this xenomorph's head was enormous and extended backward into a huge, bone-like, fan-shaped crown. Besides this, the most obvious difference from a normal xenomorph was the enormous, milky white, sac-like ovipositor connected to its lower body. This was the alien queen, the ruler of the xenomorphs. Even at this moment, this massive monster was performing its duties. Laying eggs and commanding xenomorphs in battle. Deadpool gestured with his hand, sizing up the alien queen's claws. I really don't want to be skewered by that thing. He muttered, and seeing the huge monster feigning sleep with its eyes closed, he silently admired its ability to lay eggs while sleeping, then quietly retreated. But just then, Deadpool saw the huge monster move its head, looking towards the entrance of the 5th floor not far away. A small xenomorph was moving towards the entrance. The xenomorph that saved him. At the same time, the alien queen tilted her head in confusion. She felt this xenomorph was a bit strange, and hadn't all the xenomorphs been sent out to hunt. Bang! Accompanying the stinging pain on her body, the alien queen's cold gaze swept towards Deadpool in the distance, and her body, which had been lying on the ground, slowly stood up. So scary. So scary. Deadpool shrieked, but the gun in his hand never stopped firing. The alien queen let out a low growl, fiercely swinging her sharp claws in front of her. Though it couldn't hurt her, such provocative behavior began to enrage her. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Raven, transformed into a xenomorph, rushed directly into the 5th floor entrance with astonishing speed. Hiss! Listening to the alien queen's furious roar, Deadpool waved goodbye and retreated back to the original incubation zone. Looking at the bodies of Banshee and the others, he sighed sadly. Hey, is that Brad Pietro? Deadpool looked at a corpse not far away, exclaimed, and ran over. Pat pat pat. He reached out and fumbled around, feeling the familiar texture, and exclaimed in surprise, Vanishing Man is Brad Pietro. He stared at the other person's face for a few seconds, then nodded solemnly. Good riddance. He rubbed his chin with his bone-exposed fingers, thinking about what to do next, when he suddenly saw a figure in a white coat flash across his vision. Deadpool blinked and immediately chased after him. Hey! Stop! Hearing the shout, the man in the white coat stiffened. How could there still be someone? He had confirmed before leaving the secret passage that there was no one on the 4th floor except for a few unlucky individuals who had been parasitized. Professor Lister cursed, fumbled a gun from his inner pocket, and fired a few shots at where the figure had appeared. Ah! After hearing a cry of surprise, he breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly ran to the 3rd floor. Although the 3rd floor was now full of xenomorphs, he was safer with the xenomorph pheromone on him. The xenomorphs would not only not attack him but would also become his shield. I must leave here and take this thing back to the general. As long as I take this thing back, even if this base is destroyed and all the xenomorphs die, it doesn't matter. I must. Bang! With a gunshot, Dr. Lister screamed and fell to the ground. He looked at the bullet hole in his leg, fear appearing in his eyes. I told you to stop, why didn't you listen? Deadpool mumbled as he emerged from the darkness, emptying his clip into the man in the white coat as he walked. By the time he stopped, the man in the white coat was as dead as could be. Hey! Loot! Deadpool cheered, looking at the box on the ground. And when he opened the box and saw a xenomorph egg inside, his eyes lit up slightly. I'll give it to Lynn, he must have never seen one. He chuckled, then his expression stiffened. Where's my baby Lynn? He remembered separating from Lynn earlier. Lynn! Deadpool yelled, running into the darkness. At this moment, Deadpool's baby Lynn had already entered the control center of the 5th floor. Unlike the dim environment of the first 4 floors, the lights on the 5th floor were bright, and people in white coats were busy, some operating computers, others rushing with documents. Destroy everything that cannot be taken away, except for backup data. Prepare to release the Xenomorph Emperor. Where's Professor Lister? Has he evacuated? Everyone hurry up. The base has entered self-destruct countdown. Quick, quick. Listening to these people's shouts, Raven, who had transformed into an ordinary researcher, showed a smile. Good. Found the right place. Lin and Tony finally arrived at the fourth underground floor. Both of them looked a bit disheveled. Lin's shirt had disappeared at some point, and Tony's Iron Man suit also showed some signs of corrosion. The xenomorphs were even crazier than the two had imagined. Although they were no match for the two, they still launched suicidal attacks, even completely abandoning the advantage of surprise attacks, gathering in large numbers at the entrance just to block the two from entering the fourth floor. Faced with this situation, the two wasted a lot of time, almost wiping out all the xenomorphs before successfully entering the fourth floor. Lin, the suit's energy is almost depleted. Tony said, somewhat unwillingly. Lin nodded and said, there shouldn't be many xenomorphs left. Or rather, they had already been completely cleared out. Because since they entered the fourth underground floor, they hadn't encountered a single attack. Compared to the 3 floors above, the fourth underground floor was very tall, nearly 10 meters high, making Lin feel like he had walked into a giant's palace. It feels like the height was specifically prepared to facilitate the movement of something. Tony opened his mask, observed, and muttered in confusion. Lin nodded. That's right, it's exactly what you're thinking. There's a big guy too. Tony was startled, a shock in his heart. There should be an alien queen, otherwise there wouldn't be so many xenomorphs. Lin said, and seeing that Tony was still a bit puzzled, he explained, the xenomorph's social structure is somewhat like a beehive. A look of understanding flashed in Tony's eyes. Just then, a blurry shadow rushed towards the two at high speed. Tony's heart tightened, and the moment his Iron Man mask snapped shut, his palm repulsor lit up. Wait. Lin pressed down Tony's hand, and said with a strange expression, I know this guy. As soon as he finished speaking, Deadpool excitedly pounced over. Baby Lin. I finally. Bang. Lin slapped Deadpool's face, knocking back all his remaining words. Why are you here? Lin looked at Deadpool in confusion. Deadpool blinked his beady eyes. Didn't I come with you? You came with me. Lin was stunned when he heard this. If you came with me, then who am I? Wait a minute. With me. Raven. It was precisely because he sensed Raven was in danger that he came here. So, Raven transformed into his likeness and came here with Deadpool. Lin's eyelid twitched, and he asked Deadpool, did you invite me here? Deadpool bit his finger, tilting his head in confusion as he looked at Lin. Lin, you're a bit strange today, aren't you? Did you lose your memory? Lin took a deep breath, looking at Deadpool with a speechless expression. The question in his heart was resolved. I prepared a gift for you. Deadpool opened the briefcase and handed it to Lin as if presenting a treasure. Alien eggs. Lin pressed down on the box, asking with a headache, where did you get these? I took care of a disobedient old man. Deadpool's voice was full of triumph. Just then, Tony hesitated and asked, Lin, you're not here to save this guy, are you? Before Lin could answer, the briefcase in Deadpool's hand suddenly fell to the ground, and he covered his mouth with both hands, exclaiming, Iron Man. A living Iron Man. Tony's mouth opened and closed, unsure how to respond. Can you sign an autograph for me? Deadpool turned his back to Tony, patting his butt, on my perky ass. Lin kicked Deadpool's butt, sending him flying several meters away, then said helplessly, stop playing around, I need to save someone. He picked up the briefcase from the ground, casually put it into his inner world, and walked towards the entrance of the fourth floor. Deadpool scrambled up from the ground and quickly chased after him. Tony watched this scene and couldn't help but complain, why does this guy seem like a lunatic? A moment later, the three arrived not far from the entrance to the fifth floor and saw the alien queen guarding the entrance. Is that the big guy here? Tony looked at the alien queen, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. Its massive size alone looked incredibly imposing. Lin nodded, saying coldly, it's the alien queen. The crown-like exoskeleton already indicated the identity of this alien. Deadpool cowered behind Lin. So scary. Perhaps sensing Lin's threat, the alien queen tore off the ovipositor beneath her and blocked the entrance to the fifth floor with her massive body. This was the mission she had been given by her master since birth. No prey must ever be allowed to enter the fifth floor. I'll go. Tony said, and the Iron Man suit shot forward with jets of flame. Although the suit's energy was low, he was confident he could take down this big guy. But, confidence was one thing, and insufficient energy was another. Tony directly activated the Lin combat template, and rushed in front of the alien queen. Mr. Stark. Supersonic combat mode will rapidly consume the suit's energy. With the current energy, it can only. Jarvis's words were cut short as the screen inside the suit dimmed. The Iron Man suit's energy was at rock bottom. No. This rapid energy consumption, it's not this fast, is it? As he cursed, the alien queen swatted him away like a toy, sending him flying with a single slap. Lin vanished from his spot, and just as Tony was about to hit the wall, he caught him and threw him into his inner world. The alien queen charged furiously at Lin, leaping up violently, her gaping maw aimed at Lin, and the pharyngeal jaws in her large mouth shot out at Lin's head with afterimages. But Lin, who could fly, was more agile than her. Bang! Lin appeared above the alien queen's head with a sonic boom, clasping his hands together and smashing down hard. Bang! The alien queen's body trembled, letting out a painful roar, and her massive body fell from midair. But before she could get up, Lin descended like a javelin from midair. His feet, like sharp spearheads, stomped on the alien queen's body. Hiss! Roar! The alien queen cried out in pain, and cracks actually appeared in her thick exoskeleton. Suddenly, a long tail swung towards Lin with terrifying force. Lin's body flickered, disappearing from the alien queen's body. The alien queen's long tail whipped at empty air, but it produced a loud bang. Good strength, speed, and defense, but not enough to be a match. A thought flashed through Lin's mind. As the alien queen was getting up from the ground, he appeared beside her thrashing long tail. After embracing the thick, powerful tail, he used force to swing her massive body away. Rumble. The alien queen crashed into a pillar on the 4th floor, shattering it. Debris flew everywhere. The stone pillar collapsed with a crash, falling towards the alien queen. But at this moment, this big guy displayed an agility that was inconsistent with her massive body. With a powerful push of her strong hind legs, she nimbly dodged the falling pillar. Hey! Lin chuckled softly, suddenly appearing next to the fallen stone pillar. The next instant, Lin put the stone pillar into his inner world, and as the alien queen shrieked and charged at him, the stone pillar suddenly reappeared in his arms. Ha! Lin let out a low shout, wrapping his arms around half of the pillar and swinging it forcefully. Bang! The alien queen was sent flying. But before she could land, Lin appeared in front of the alien queen again, the vanished stone pillar reappeared, and Lin pressed it against her body, pinning her against the wall. Hiss! Roar! Roar! The alien queen shrieked in pain, her sharp claws and long tail constantly flailing. But the next second, the stone pillar smashed hard onto her head. The alien queen's wail paused, and her flailing limbs slowed down. Then, boom, boom. Impact after impact continuously resounded, as if hitting the hearts of everyone in the control center, making the faces of all the researchers grow paler and paler. Except for Raven. She watched the scene on the monitor, looking at the figure holding the giant stone pillar, her heart pounding frantically, and the blood in her body seemed to be burning. This was the allure of power. Stop. She took a step, blocking a researcher with astonishing speed, and said calmly, "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" The researcher trying to sneak away turned pale, looking at Raven with resentment, and angrily said, "You'll go to hell." Raven had eliminated all the guards on the 5th floor, and to obtain the alien data, she had also killed many researchers, even using neurotoxin to kill the xenomorph emperor about to be released. Raven had stripped these people of their trump cards, cut off their escape routes, leaving them here to wait for death. "Then you'll go to hell first." Raven squeezed the researcher's neck, sneering, "Wait for me down there, I'll kill you all again." Crack. She snapped the researcher's neck, glanced at the base's self-destruct countdown, and gave the remaining researchers a slight smile. "Gentlemen, I wish you a pleasant death." With that, she rushed towards the 4th floor at top speed. Lin was here, her god was here. Then there was nothing to worry about. The entire island was wailing. The energy accumulated from the explosion tore through the ground, and a giant fireball, engulfed in thick smoke, shot into the sky. The impact spread rapidly outwards in ripples across the surrounding sea, pressing the once calm surface into a temporary, massive crater, then stirring up a circle of towering white giant waves that surged towards the distance with an overwhelming force. Tens of seconds later, when everything slowly returned to calm, the original artificial island no longer existed, leaving only a chaotic expanse of water littered with wreckage and debris. Just then, a figure flew out of the seawater, residual water droplets on his body blown away by the strong wind, his muscular and well-built physique seeming to glow in the morning light. Lin narrowed his eyes, looking at the sun hanging on the horizon, and was stunned for a moment. It's already the second day. Why does it feel like a long time has passed? Lin stretched in midair and flew towards New York. While Lin was on his way, his inner world was quite lively. Before the base explosion, Lin had put everyone into his inner world to escape the explosion that destroyed the entire island. At this moment, Tony and the other three sat together, their expressions somewhat complex. Raven was warily watching Logan, because Logan had once clawed her. Tony narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing Raven, because at this moment, Raven had golden hair and blue eyes, and was beautiful to the extreme. Logan was warily watching Deadpool, because Deadpool was already almost pressing against him, even drooling. And Deadpool's gaze shifted back and forth between the three, but his body was quietly inching closer to Logan. Just then, Deadpool said with a grin, "How about we all introduce ourselves?" Tony and the other two looked at each other. Tony Stark, Lin's friend. Tony said indifferently. Wow, Iron Man Tony Stark actually admits someone as his friend. Deadpool exclaimed dramatically, cupping his face, then lightly nudged Tony with his elbow, grinning, "You seem to really like Lin." Tony shifted uncomfortably to the side, lightly patting the spot that had been touched. He wasn't used to people touching him. Raven looked at Tony, a thoughtful look flashing in her eyes. Raven, Lin's follower. She lightly flicked her long golden hair, gave Tony a charming smile, and softly said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Stark." Tony's eyebrow raised slightly, and he said with a surprised expression, "Follower. Lin has followers." Raven smiled and nodded. Logan Howlett, also Lin's follower. Logan's expression was a bit awkward, but he still admitted his identity. Ah! Deadpool exclaimed, shaking his head in disbelief, "You would actually become Lin's follower. You're Wolverine." Logan looked at Deadpool strangely. "Is that a problem?" "Of course it's a problem. You're mine." Deadpool shouted, pressing his hands on Logan's shoulders, and excitedly said, "You and I are a perfect match." Logan slapped Deadpool's hands away and said coldly, "Don't touch me, or I'll kill you." He didn't want to be overly involved with such a psychopath. Deadpool was silent, his shoulders twitching, extremely heartbroken. Like a pitiful woman abandoned by a scoundrel. Raven looked at Deadpool, amused. After getting used to this guy's neurotic behavior, watching him with the mindset of enjoying a show was actually quite interesting. "So," she asked indifferently, "you haven't introduced yourself yet." This was her first time meeting Deadpool. "Oh, right." Deadpool stopped acting, straightened up, and said in a deep voice, "My name is Wade, you can call me Deadpool." He looked at everyone with a serious expression and said coldly, "I don't care how you, the mistresses, concubines, and side chicks, met Lin. The three. I was the first to meet him. With me here, you'll always be the mistresses, concubines, and side chicks." Deadpool puffed out his chest, looking at the three with disdain. Tony and the other two were silent for a few seconds. Raven said languidly, "This guy is not only a psychopath, but also delusional." Tony pressed his temples, looking like he had a headache, and said to Logan and the other guys, "I have a suggestion." Logan, understanding, added, "Bury him." "Hey, I'm still here." Deadpool exclaimed. He angrily pointed at the three and shouted loudly, "You guys are too rampant, I must tell my precious Lin your true colors. You." Before he could finish, Lin suddenly appeared in the inner world, expressionlessly punched Deadpool in the face, interrupting him, and threw him to the edge of the inner world. "Well done." Tony praised, then asked in confusion, "We shouldn't be in New York yet, right?" "No." Lin nodded and said to everyone, "But before returning to New York, I think we need to discuss how to handle this matter." As soon as he finished speaking, Raven said coldly, "I'll go kill that scumbag." Tony frowned and said, "Miss, that's a major general. What will happen if you kill him? Have you thought about the consequences?" Raven gritted her teeth. Do you know what he has done? I know. Tony's tone was somewhat heavy. He knew much more about some military matters than ordinary people, but what William Stryker did still exceeded his imagination. Cultivating aliens with humans and mutants, creating biological weapons. He must die. Lynn said indifferently. Raven's heart rejoiced, and she looked at Lynn in surprise. She hadn't expected Lynn to agree with her approach. Lynn, don't be impulsive. Tony frowned at Lynn. I didn't say to kill him immediately. Lynn smiled slightly, a cold glint in his eyes. What if he's no longer a major general? What if he becomes the most hated anti-humanitarian criminal to everyone? It wasn't just mutants who died on Alien Island, or became hosts for aliens. There were far more humans, and many more than mutants. You want to use this incident, use public opinion to bring him down. Tony stroked his chin and nodded. That's feasible, and as long as there's direct evidence proving that he is indeed the mastermind behind Alien Island, the success rate is very high. Without direct evidence, William Stryker could find 1,000 reasons to deny everything on the island. Tony said in a deep voice, although I recorded the battle process from the moment I entered Alien Island, none of these things can prove his involvement. Raven took out a portable hard drive. Here are all the research materials from that base. She then pointed to the box Deadpool had left behind. There's a special alien egg in there. Tony looked at Raven in some surprise. You got the research materials? Raven nodded and asked, is this enough? Tony pondered, I'll know after I look at the data first. Tony fiddled with the hard drive next to the Iron Man suit for a while, and a light screen projected from the Iron Man suit's mask. Isn't your suit out of energy? Lynn asked, puzzled. Tony slid his hand across the light screen and explained casually, that's relative to powering the Iron Man suit for combat. If it's just for reading data, the residual energy in the suit is more than enough. He quickly scanned through the data, having Jarvis retrieve information related to William Stryker. A moment later, his brows gradually furrowed, and he waved his hand, dismissing the light screen. This research data is very detailed and should be very valuable to them, but there's no direct evidence to show he's the direct supervisor of the Alien Island project. Tony delivered the bad news. Raven's expression changed slightly, and she subconsciously looked at Lynn. Seeing Lynn looking at her with a smile, she was slightly taken aback. What should we do? Lynn chuckled softly and pointed at Raven. Raven, don't forget. You're a mutant. Raven froze, then her eyes brightened, clearly understanding Lynn's meaning. What do you mean? Tony looked at Lynn in confusion. Lynn smiled faintly. If there's no evidence, we'll create it ourselves. With that, he tilted his chin towards Raven. Show Tony your ability. As Lynn spoke, Raven tilted her head and, to Tony's shocked gaze, transformed into his likeness. Hello, I'm Tony Stark. Raven said blandly. Her tone and expression when speaking were identical to Tony's own. The next second, Raven reverted to her blonde appearance. Tony was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly said faintly, looking at myself like this, I feel so punchable. Ha ha. You finally realized it. Lynn chuckled, the matter of evidence is up to you and Raven. Tony looked at Lynn speechlessly and teased, buddy, you're asking an Avenger, a genius scientist, to help you forge evidence. Lynn said seriously, I'm just asking my friend, a superhero, to use some small tricks to defeat an anti-human individual. Tony's eyebrow raised slightly. All right, you've convinced me. Thanks. Lynn thanked Tony and lightly patted his shoulder. Raven breathed a sigh of relief and also looked at Tony gratefully. Logan asked, puzzled, what are you talking about? Who is that person? The three of them paused, then couldn't help but chuckle. That's right. Logan hadn't been involved in this, so he had no idea what had happened. I'll tell you. Deadpool yelled as he ran over. Shut up. Logan snapped at Deadpool. If this guy told it, it would only get more confusing, and he suspected the other party didn't even know, just wanted to do something with him. Deadpool still wanted to speak, but Logan raised his hand and extended his adamantium claws towards Deadpool. I'm going to sleep. Deadpool circled around everyone, then returned to the edge of the inner world. He. Raven chuckled and said to Logan, not long ago, we went through a battle on that island. She slowly recounted the events on Alien Island. After listening, Logan's expression remained calm, After all, he had lived long enough and seen enough. Until Raven spoke that name. The mastermind behind Alien Island is a major general named William Stryker. William Stryker. Logan roared out the name, his eyes instantly filled with rage, his entire being seemingly transforming into a beast that had lost its reason. Watching this scene, a thoughtful look flashed in Lin's eyes. When Logan recounted his story, he hadn't told Lin who injected him with adamantium, and Lin had assumed Logan didn't know or had lost that memory. But now it seemed, was it still Stryker who did it? But why did Logan end up in the hands of Sentinel Services, pursuing Raven, who was a Sentinel Services experiment? Was Stryker in charge of Sentinel Services? Or did he have connections with Sentinel Services? Whatever the reason, William Stryker must die. Lin murmured in his heart and said to Logan, "Logan, calm down." Logan looked at Lin with bloodshot eyes, desperately suppressing his out-of-control emotions. "His life is yours," Lin said blandly, already having decided Stryker's fate. Logan gasped violently, and said with difficulty, "Good. This scoundrel was the one who injected him with the alloy, controlled him, and turned him into a soulless killing machine." Tony and Raven looked at Logan, somewhat puzzled by his sudden rage. They looked at Lin, and seeing him shake his head at them, they suppressed their doubts. "Lin, you need to be careful." Tony suddenly looked at Lin seriously. Lin paused, then understood. He had acted with Tony this time, and Raven had appeared on Alien Island in his likeness. In other words, his information might already be on William Stryker's desk. If William Stryker were to do anything to him, he would be digging his own grave. Lin smiled, he should be the one who needs to be careful. With that, he took a step and disappeared from the inner world, appearing on the open sea. "Make a move against me." Lin's lips curled slightly. Stryker shouldn't be that stupid, right? Leaving aside other things, just his father, whose public identity was the director of the New York Police Department. To provoke the director of the New York Police Department while being targeted by the Avengers was not a wise choice. Moreover, if Stryker wanted to do anything, Lin guaranteed he would die even faster. They wouldn't even need their father and son to act, his mother could silently eliminate Stryker. Just like when he was a child, the mayor of New York City who said he would kill their whole family died on a woman's belly the next day. Lin thought of his childhood, smiled and shook his head, continuing to fly towards New York. Time was pressing, he had a dinner date with May Parker tonight. He would know Peter Parker's identity tonight. Thinking of this, a hint of curiosity appeared in Lin's eyes, and his flying speed increased. Inside a secret base belonging to the military. In the sunlit office, the white-haired Stryker sat at his desk, looking at the information sent from the Alien Island base. Although he was trying his best to remain calm, the occasional twitch of his eye betrayed his emotions. Alien Island had so much effort invested, but now it was destroyed like this, his heart was bleeding. Most importantly, the alien eggs, the latest achievement, were not brought out either. Thinking of this, Stryker finally couldn't hold back, slammed his fist on the desk, and cursed under his breath. Lister, that idiot. Although he still had backups of the research data, that research data falling into the hands of the Avengers was not a good thing. What made him feel fortunate was that he had always been very careful with the research on Alien Island, leaving no evidence of his involvement. Avengers, Avengers. Stryker stared at the computer screen, looking at some footage from Alien Island, finding it more and more unsettling. Tony Stark, and Lin Crete. He tapped his desk lightly, his eyes gleaming with thought. Since Tony Stark appeared on Alien Island, it meant the Avengers had already set their sights on the island. Only a few days had passed since the Battle of New York, and the Avengers, due to their performance in that battle, were undoubtedly in the spotlight, with unmatched prestige. Coupled with the power displayed by its various members. Stryker's mouth twitched. It was best not to provoke these self-righteous freaks now. As for Lin Crete, he had also investigated his identity. The son of the New York Police Department director. However, from the power he displayed, he was very likely a mutant. Using this as leverage, could he make that director control his son? But he heard that the police station director was already preparing for retirement. However, Lin Crete was now involved with the Avengers. Bang! Stryker slammed his hand on the desk, unable to help but exclaim, "The Avengers. A gathering of freaks." This thing shouldn't even exist. He recalled everything about Alien Island, and after confirming that he had left no trace of his involvement, he breathed a slight sigh of relief. He could just push all the blame onto that old immortal, Charles Wayland. He knew nothing. At most, he would only receive some punishment for lax oversight. The project would continue. If he succeeded in his research, demonstrating the value and potential of this project, and held an undeniable power in his hands, the military would instead become his protective umbrella. Stryker's eyes flickered, and he slowly rose and left the office. He wouldn't put all his eggs in one basket. On a beach tens of kilometers outside New York City, Lynn quietly landed on the beach, and after confirming no one was there, he released Logan and Raven from his inner world. Logan, they should be here soon to reclaim you. I know. Logan nodded, a grim smile on his face. If he could, he wanted to kill everyone who came for him, but he knew even more clearly that those who came for him were just obedient dogs. Killing a few dogs wouldn't bother the person behind the scenes at all. When you saved Logan but didn't remove that tracker, did you already anticipate this day? Raven looked at Lynn in surprise, her eyes filled with admiration. Something like that. Lynn nodded, then looked at Logan beside him again. At this moment, Logan had returned to his beast killer appearance, not only putting the control device back on his head but even changing his clothes back to those tattered pants. And the tracker on him, after passing through Tony's hands, was in a semi-damaged state, with its signal transmission intermittent. He disguised Logan as if the tracker was damaged and he had been submerged in the sea. Raven, be careful. Lynn cautioned Raven. When those people came for Logan, Raven would seize the opportunity to replace one of them and return to the base with Logan. Take this. Lynn handed Raven the shielding device made by Tony, and in Raven's puzzled gaze, explained, this is a mutant gene shielding device made by Tony. That's great. Raven exclaimed in delight. With this item, the difficulty of her actions within the base would plummet. Logan, don't act impulsively. Lynn cautioned Logan again, then said to the two, the rest is up to you. I won't let you down. Raven looked at Lynn with fervent eyes, her faith growing purer. Lynn nodded to the two, then slowly flew up, paused briefly in midair, and then disappeared with a piercing sonic boom. After Logan and Raven exchanged glances, they began to wait. Lynn flew towards the Avengers Tower, but halfway there, he seemed to suddenly remember something, found a suitable place, placed Deadpool in a corner of New York, and then, under Deadpool's resentful gaze, flew back to the Avengers Tower. Lynn landed on the top floor of Stark Tower, and with a gentle wave of his hand, pulled Tony out of his inner world. Welcome back, Mr. Stark. Jarvis's metallic voice sounded, and Tony let out a comfortable sigh of relief. During Lynn's journey, the three of them had been driven crazy by Deadpool's mouth. That feeling, like 100, no, 1,000 flies buzzing around you, and you couldn't get rid of them, was truly annoying. Finally back. Tony sighed, and after leading Lynn into the building, immediately poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Lynn, then drank his own in one gulp, and said to Lynn, when do you plan to start? As soon as possible. Lynn picked up his glass and took a sip, then sat on the sofa, pondering, the longer it drags on, the more preparation time the other party will have. All right. Tony responded, poured himself another glass of wine, and sipping it, walked to the sofa opposite Lynn and sat down, saying, bring out the Iron Man suit. As soon as he finished speaking, Lynn took out the Mark 9 from his inner world. And the moment the Iron Man suit was taken out, the data contained within it was uploaded to his private server. Jarvis, bring up folder number 001. Yes, Mr. Stark. With Jarvis's voice, a light screen was projected in front of him. He tapped the light screen a few times, and information about Alien Island appeared on it, but unlike before, there were many more traces left by William Stryker, including even voice work records and some videos. During this time in the inner world, Tony provided Raven with a video of Stryker, and Raven, after watching it only twice, transformed into Stryker's likeness and worked with Tony to complete the evidence for Alien Island. Very good. Tony nodded, his finger gently sliding across the light screen, muttering to himself, plus some photos and videos from Alien Island. A moment later, he satisfactorily dismissed the light screen. No problem. By this time tomorrow, these materials will accidentally be stolen and then spread online. Thanks. Lin thanked Tony again. Tony didn't have to get involved in this. Tony shrugged, helping you is one reason, but it's more because William Stryker's actions deserve this outcome. He looked at Lin. I know a good barbecue place, want to go together? No. Lin smiled and stood up, saying, I already have plans tonight. I need to go back and prepare. Tony looked at Lin in surprise, then smirked, need my advice? Lin looked speechless. She's about your age, just a friend. Wow. Sunset. The orange-red sunlight fell on the sea, turning the entire ocean into beautiful orange amber. Splash, splash. The waves crashed against the beach, also washing over a sturdy figure. Several Sentinel Services vehicles appeared near the beach, and fully armed Sentinel Services soldiers ran out of the cars, then, led by a Sentinel Services detective, slowly approached the beach. When they saw the figure lying on the beach, their hearts slowly rose into their throats. If this terrifying beast were to awaken and break free from Sentinel Services chains, all of them combined wouldn't be enough for him to kill. Fortunately, their worries were unnecessary. Even when they walked up to the beast remained motionless. He's unconscious, then. The detective murmured, sizing up Logan. Put the mutant inhibitor on him. The detective said, and a soldier approached Logan with a collar-like device. Once the mutant inhibitor is worn, a mutant's abilities will be restricted, and if they try to forcefully use their mutant abilities, the collar will continuously discharge electricity, causing the mutant immense pain. All of Sentinel Services mutant test subjects wear such collars. And only when conducting relevant ability tests will this collar be removed. A layer of cold sweat broke out on the soldier's forehead, and just as he was about to put the mutant inhibitor on Logan, who had been feigning unconsciousness, suddenly opened his eyes. This sudden change made the soldier's hand tremble, and a look of terror appeared in his eyes. It's over. The next moment, adamantium claws pierced through the soldier's body. The scene instantly descended into chaos. Everyone, step back, step back. The detective shouted loudly, while the soldiers aimed their guns at Logan. Logan pulled his claws from the corpse, slowly stood up from the ground, his eyes filled with confusion and numbness, and he did not actively attack. Seeing this, the detective breathed a sigh of relief. This was a good sign. So, just now, was it merely this beast's instinctive self-preservation? Just as this thought crossed his mind, he saw the indestructible adamantium claws extend. Not good. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he saw Logan pounce on the nearest soldier. No. The soldier screamed in terror, and bullets rained down on Logan. Thud, thud, thud. Bullets struck Logan, drawing a series of blood beads. Slash. Logan's claws passed through the soldier's chin, slicing the soldier's head into several pieces. Watching this bloody scene, the entire situation instantly became chaotic. And taking advantage of this opportunity, Raven replaced a soldier. Logan moved through the hail of bullets, taking down several soldiers in a row. Then, as if he had crashed, he suddenly stopped in place again. Seeing this, the detective had a flash of inspiration and quickly shouted, Weapon X, stop your actions. Put on the inhibitor. Logan hesitated for a moment, walked to the inhibitor, picked it up, and put it around his neck. Phew. All the soldiers breathed a sigh of relief. The detective wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. The control effect was still there. It should be due to insufficient X-143 extract, causing the effect to weaken. Weapon X, do not resist. The detective shouted again, and seeing no reaction from Logan, he yelled at his subordinate soldiers. Take him back. Several soldiers swarmed forward, putting Logan into a car. Only then did the detective relax. He looked at the sea, a look of realization flashing in his eyes. No wonder Weapon X's tracking signal suddenly disappeared and then reappeared. Was it because the person who defeated this beast, finding him impossible to kill, threw him into the sea? As for the tracking signal disappearing, it's not hard to understand that the tracker could have been damaged in battle. That must be it. The detective muttered, looking at the car Logan was in, a look of disgust flashing in his eyes. What a disgusting monster, he couldn't even die when thrown into the sea. That's fine too, he can continue to be Sentinel Services hound. A few minutes later, the sky completely darkened, and the Sentinel Services personnel quickly departed. At the same time, Lin arrived at the Chinese restaurant May Parker mentioned, carrying the gifts he bought. This Chinese restaurant was located in Manhattan, and although not in Chinatown, it was not far from Chinatown. Mama Lee's private kitchen. Lynn looked at the sign, smiled, and walked in, and led by a waiter, found May Parker, who had already arrived at the restaurant. May Parker saw Lynn, smiled, stood up, and gave Lynn a light hug. A gift for you. Lynn handed a wrapped small gift to May Parker. May Parker took it with a smile. After they sat down, Lynn looked at the chair next to May Parker. Where's Peter? This was the main reason he accepted the invitation. May Parker smiled a little sheepishly. He's on his way, that boy has been so secretive lately. She said with a frown, called a waiter over, and said to Lynn, let's not wait for him, how about we order first? She remembered that Lynn loved Chinese food and was a Chinese food connoisseur. Lynn put the menu handed to him by the waiter aside, asked for a piece of paper and a pen, and after writing down the names of several dishes in neat block characters, said to the waiter, give this menu to the chef. He didn't want to eat those strange localized Chinese dishes. The waiter looked at Lynn with surprise, took Lynn's menu, and walked towards the kitchen. Cool. May Parker praised, mimicking Lynn's writing posture from just now and making 2 strokes. You write beautifully, I wish Peter were as excellent as you. Lynn said earnestly, he will be even better than me. May Parker smiled happily, but after checking her watch, her delicate brows furrowed slightly. Peter was becoming more and more unruly lately. To prevent Peter from being late, she had deliberately set the time half an hour earlier. But Lynn had arrived, and Peter was still not here. Did he get a girlfriend? May Parker murmured softly. No sooner had she spoken than a lively boy walked towards them, carrying his school bag. Aunt May. Peter called out, waving at May Parker. May Parker gave Peter an exasperated look, mouthed something at Peter, silently saying, I'll deal with you when we get home. Immediately, Peter wilted like a frosted eggplant, slumping down with his head bowed. Lynn watched this scene with amusement and said to Peter, so late. It must have been quite a journey. Peter paused, he felt there was a hidden meaning in Lynn's words, but he still politely said, I'm sorry, Mr. Crit, for making you wait. Not that. Lynn smiled at Peter, motioned for Peter to lean closer, helped Peter adjust his hoodie collar, and whispered, your suit is showing. Peter found the meal bland and uninteresting, he was practically blank-minded, just chewing his food numbly. May Parker looked at her nephew worriedly, wondering if her earlier threat had scared him. Eat this. Lynn mischievously put a chili pepper on Peter's plate. Peter took a bite. Hiss. So spicy. The intense sensation brought Peter back to his senses. He drank water in large gulps, looking at Lynn with a wronged expression. Seeing Lynn smiling at him and sensing that Lynn meant no harm, the worry that had been weighing on him finally eased a little. Peter, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Shall we chat later? Lynn asked with a smile. Okay. Peter was more than willing. He was very curious how Lynn knew. Did he guess it just from a glimpse of his suit? But even if a normal person noticed, they wouldn't immediately think it was a battle suit, would they? Seeing Peter return to normal, May Parker gave Lynn a grateful look and then placed some vegetables on Peter's plate. Try this, it's delicious. She found that all the dishes Lynn ordered were to her liking. Peter nodded, finally focusing his attention on the delicious food in front of him. A moment later, as Lynn and the other 2 finished their meal and went to pay, something interesting happened. Because Lynn had handwritten the menu and ordered some authentic Chinese dishes, the boss gave May Parker a 20% discount, making May Parker exclaim happily about her luck. After thanking the boss, Lynn left the restaurant with the 2 of them. Aunt May, you go back first. I want to chat with Mr. Crit. Peter whispered to May Parker. May Parker looked at Peter suspiciously. Just as Peter thought May wouldn't agree, he saw his Aunt May mischievously pinch his face. Are you going to ask him about relationship problems? Aunt May. Peter looked at May Parker, speechless. All right, I won't say anything. May Parker patted Peter's head, checked the time, and admonished him, come home early. The nights had become even more unsafe recently. I know. Peter nodded. After watching May Parker leave, he took a deep breath, turned, and walked towards Lynn. Mr. Crit, how did you find out? He looked at Lynn nervously. Although he had only been a street hero for a little over 10 days, he had already completely fallen in love with this new identity. He enjoyed the satisfaction he got from helping others, and he liked the feeling of roaming the city. Are you sure you want to chat here? Lin looked at Peter with a smile. Peter shook his head. Seeing Lin turn and walk into an alley, he quickened his pace to follow him. The moment he stepped into the alley, a fist shot towards his face. Peter's eyes widened. A sense of danger quietly appeared, but he didn't dodge. Lin's fist stopped in front of Peter's eyes and lightly flicked Peter's forehead. Where's your spider sense? Logically, with Spider-Man's abnormal, almost precognitive, sensory ability, he should have definitely dodged that punch. Spider sense. What's that? Peter asked in confusion. A kind of intuition, a special sensory ability that guides you to avoid danger and fight, making you stronger. Lin said calmly. Seeing Peter's gaze become increasingly curious, he smiled and said, "You seem to have questions you want to ask me. Mr. Crit, who exactly are you? You seem to know a lot about me." After gaining his abilities, he had been completely fumbling on his own, with no one to guide him. And no one had ever helped him resolve the doubts and frustrations he had accumulated during this time. Now, perhaps this was a very good opportunity. Peter looked at Lin eagerly. Lin raised an eyebrow and said to Peter, "Put on your suit." "Let me see." "Okay." Peter responded and changed into his suit in front of Lin at the fastest speed. A light blue tight-fitting tracksuit, with a red vest over the upper body, and a red hood sewn with goggles. How is it? Isn't it cool? Peter moved his body, feeling very good about himself. Lin looked at Peter's appearance and then thought of Gwen's highly aesthetic Spider-Man suit. The difference was not just a little, he sighed inwardly and gave Peter a very impartial evaluation. More like a robber. Peter's body stiffened, and he couldn't help but say, "Mr. Crit, that's truly malicious. It's your suit that's too shabby." Lin continued to deflate Peter, reaching out and pressing on Peter's shoulder, then suddenly asked, "Are you ready?" "What? Let me see your current abilities." Lin smiled slightly at Peter. While Peter was still confused, he firmly grasped Peter's shoulder, and a terrifying force instantly erupted, throwing Peter up. But Peter reacted very quickly. The next second he was airborne, he instinctively shot 2 strands of white webs at Lin. Lin caught the webs in his hand, and with a flash, he disappeared from his spot, carrying Peter high into the sky. Ah! Peter's voice stretched into a thin line in midair. Seconds later, when Lin stopped in midair, he looked down at the city below, gripping the webs tightly, and shouted at Lin, "Mr. Crit. Whatever you do, don't let go." Lin chuckled and said to Peter, "It's starting." With that, he released the webs he was holding. And in the very next second, 2 more webs shot out, wrapping around Lin's feet. Lin raised an eyebrow, only to see Peter grab the webs and swing, appearing above him. Ah! Peter screamed loudly, but his movements were not slow. He shot another web at Lin, and the moment it stuck to Lin, he clenched his fist and punched Lin from midair. Lin smiled and caught Peter's fist. Good strength, just a bit off target. The next moment, Lin, holding Peter's hand, threw Peter out again. But Peter also took advantage of Lin's speaking to wrap a large amount of webs around Lin. As he flew out, he used the amazing elasticity of the webs to fly back towards Lin at an even faster speed. Just as he was about to hit Lin, Lin suddenly flew up again, dodging Peter's punch and tearing off all the webs on his body, holding them in his hand. So fast. Peter was startled. Hold tight. Suddenly, Lin's voice came from above his head. The next moment, he felt himself spinning rapidly, like riding a wildly rotating Ferris wheel. "Oh, stop, I'm going to throw up." Peter shouted loudly. Lin chuckled, then suddenly flung Peter high into the sky again, only to reappear in front of him. "No, no higher." Peter screamed. He had never even been on an airplane. "Ha ha." Lin laughed happily, raised his hand, pressed it against Peter's chest, and pulled him into his inner world. Peter lay on the grass, panting heavily, feeling his soul struggling to return to its place. It was too exhilarating. Although it lasted less than a minute, every second he spent high in the air, his adrenaline surged, and his consciousness was incredibly focused. At that moment, he had only one thought. Survive. And in that situation, he felt as if there was a voice inside his body telling him what to do next. Is this what Mr. Crit called spider sense? A hint of realization dawned on Peter. By the looks of you, it seems you've noticed something. Lin blocked the falling moonlight, looking down at Peter, casting a shadow over him. Peter looked at Lin, took off his mask, and sat up with his hands on the ground, flashing a brilliant smile at Lin. Mr. Crit, thank you. This is Peter Parker. Lin sighed inwardly, smiling as he sat beside Peter. Aren't you afraid I'll throw you down? No. Peter looked at Lin happily and said, when you threw me up and I flew into the air, I knew who you were. Lin. The Lin who solved the nuclear crisis. Lin smiled and asked, when did you get your superpowers? Gwen, Peter, are there two little spiders in this universe? In some ways, this is quite a terrifying thing. A thought flashed through Lin's mind, then he heard Peter say, it was when I was bitten by a spider during a visit to Oscorp Industries. Also bitten during a visit to Oscorp Industries. Lin was stunned. Was it the same spider that bit Gwen? If it was the same spider. Spider-Man and Silk. Lin's eyes narrowed as he suddenly remembered this pair of Spider-Men. In some parallel universe, these two acquired the same superpowers after being bitten by a spider. He turned to examine Peter, then suddenly asked, was anyone else bitten by a spider that day? I don't know. Peter shook his head. After he was bitten that day, he felt very uncomfortable and couldn't pay attention to anything else. He looked at Lin strangely. Why do you ask? Lin didn't answer, but continued to ask, have you sensed a presence, or rather, a person, that you particularly care about? Peter pondered for several seconds, then shook his head. No. Right. Peter doesn't even seem to have mastered his spider sense yet. You. Just as Lin was about to say something, he suddenly noticed the web shooters on Peter's wrists and was stunned. The day he met Gwen, did Gwen have web shooters? Lin carefully recalled every detail of that day, especially the scene of Gwen swinging on webs. No. No web shooters. And one of the most obvious differences between Silk and Spider-Man is the way they shoot webs. Silk can produce webs from her own body, just like the original spider spirit, but the webs are shot from her fingertips. Gwen became Silk. Lin stroked his chin, muttering to himself. Mr. Crit, do you suspect someone else was bitten? Peter asked in surprise. Lin raised an eyebrow, giving Peter a definite answer. Not suspicion, I've already met her. Who? Peter exclaimed, somewhat excitedly, is she like me? More or less. Lin nodded, then suddenly said to Peter, do you want to meet her? Her. Peter was stunned, then excitedly said, of course. But would she be willing? I can ask her for you. If she's willing, I can arrange a place for you two to meet. Lin said with a faint smile. But I. Peter said cautiously, don't want anyone else to know my true identity. No one is forcing you to meet her with your true face. Lin teased, maybe she's even more unwilling to reveal her true identity than you are. Phew, that's great. Peter breathed a sigh of relief, lay down on the grass, and said happily, it's wonderful that Mr. Crit is the first person to know my identity. Actually, during this time, he had been somewhat lost, and even scared. He didn't know how to be a hero, how to balance his identities as Peter, a student, and a hero, and he was afraid of his identity being known. But now, after talking with Lin, he found himself much more relaxed. Lin smiled and said to Peter, don't tell anyone else your identity until you're ready, it will cause you trouble. Not all superheroes are Tony Stark. I understand. Peter nodded, then nervously asked, Mr. Crit, can I come to you in the future? For a chat or other things? Lin reached out and ruffled Peter's hair. You can. Peter looked at Lin, suddenly remembering a few years ago, after his uncle Parker died, when he followed Aunt May to Crete Clinic and met Lin for the first time. At that time, Lin touched his head just like now and told him he could come to him for help if he encountered trouble, and even took him to do various interesting experiments in the clinic. After that period, what he looked forward to most was going to Crete Clinic to play. And after that period, after Aunt May emerged from the shadow of Uncle Parker's death, he never went again. So, he had known Mr. Crit for so long. Peter sighed inwardly, looked at the moon in the sky, and suddenly exclaimed, what is this place? Is this Mr. Crit's ability? Ha 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 ha. Lin teased, Peter, your senses are too dull. Peter rubbed his head awkwardly. Because Mr. Crit kept asking me about other things. Lin nodded. Yes, this is my ability, this is my small world. New world. Peter was stunned. He had originally thought Lin's ability would be something like teleportation. He stood up in surprise, looking into the distance. It doesn't look very big. Lin's face darkened, and he lightly coughed. It will only grow larger with enough followers. Followers. Peter blinked, then asked again, are you a god? Is that why you need followers? Lin smiled mysteriously. You'll know later. Peter had an answer in his heart and couldn't help but ask, Mr. Crit, how can one become your follower? Does it require a baptism or something? Before Lin could answer, Peter asked a string of other questions. Mr. Crit, what were you thinking when you flew towards the nuclear bomb? Lin. Mr. Crit, how do you spread faith? Will you fight with other gods? What do you usually do? Do you go to various places to display miracles? Mr. Crit. Whoosh. Lin descended rapidly from high altitude, landing on the rooftop of a building, then pulled Peter out of his inner world. Goodbye. Lin said, and without waiting for Peter to speak, he disappeared before him. This kid is too terrifying. His incessant chatter rivals Deadpool's, and he asks far too many questions. If it were Deadpool, it would be fine. If annoyed, he could punch him. But Peter is a polite child, constantly calling him Mr. Crit, so he couldn't bring himself to tell him to shut up, let alone beat him up. Lin flew home, but his thoughts lingered on Peter and Gwen. If Gwen really is Silk, then this means that in the future, there might be a family that hunts spider totem inheritors. Morlin. This world is becoming increasingly chaotic. A thought flashed through Lin's mind, and he quickly flew home. A moment later, he landed on the balcony, only to see his father still watching TV, and it was a soap opera about Greek mythology. Lin's mouth twitched, he wanted to complain but didn't know where to start. He opened the balcony door and walked into the living room, unable to help but say, you must be really bored. What are you even watching? You're back. Zeus turned to look at Lin and asked, where have you been these past 2 days? I found some things to do. Lin said vaguely. Care for a drink? Zeus smiled, pointing to the liquor cabinet. Grab the most expensive bottle of whiskey. You're in such a good mood today. Lin looked at his father in surprise, poured 2 glasses of wine, walked over, and handed one to Zeus. I'm getting closer to retirement, of course I'm in a good mood. Zeus laughed happily, took a sip of his drink, and said to Lin, once I retire, I'll travel with your mother. Lin rolled his eyes, speechless, are you sure she's traveling? Zeus gave an awkward smile. It's normal for a few accidents to happen occasionally while traveling. Heh. Lin sneered. Although his mother had never revealed her other identity, after all these years, if Lin hadn't noticed anything, he would have lived in vain. Just then, Zeus suddenly roared, as king of the gods, I would never turn into a swan to seduce girls. Lin. What kind of look is that? Zeus glared at Lin, grunting in displeasure. I may be a philanderer, but I'm not a psychologically twisted pervert. These hateful mortals are simply ruining my reputation. You can really turn into a swan. Lin couldn't help but ask. Zeus said proudly, I can transform into many things. Oh. Lin's interest peaked, and he suddenly asked, so, how much of what's recorded about you in myths is true? Zeus stroked the beard on his chin, thinking seriously, most of it is factually incorrect, they are all twisted fantasies of mortals. He grumbled discontentedly, his expression somewhat annoyed. Mythological stories are, after all, just stories, and there's a big difference from reality. Lin naturally understood this. Just like Odin's family, many things in their story don't align with Norse mythology at all. However, among your wives, were quite a few really your blood relatives. It was a rare opportunity, and Lin, uncharacteristically, became a bit gossipy. Zeus's mouth twitched, but he said with a normal expression, there's no rule in Olympus against close relatives marrying, nor do we produce mentally challenged offspring like mortals. On the contrary, children born from pure bloodlines have the greatest chance of inheriting divine power. OWW. Lin drew out the sound. Zeus looked at Lin coldly, then suddenly grabbed Lin's neck in anger. You brat, what kind of look is that? Do you know how aggrieved I am, as king of the gods, that those hateful goddesses, wanting to bear powerful offspring, constantly set traps for me, even ganging up on me? Hiss. Lin suddenly gasped. He actually heard a hint of grievance from his father's mouth. So, his old man was just a seed producer. Although he had long been mentally prepared for mythology to differ from reality, this was too insane. It was even more outrageous than Loki, who had his seniority reduced and became Odin's adopted son. Poseidon and Hades, they can't share any of the burden, two incompetent fools. Zeus cursed under his breath, utterly displeased with his two brothers. Lin's face darkened, feeling that Olympus was becoming increasingly difficult to look at directly. Hee hee. Zeus suddenly looked at Lin and chuckled. Lin shivered. I'm your son. Zeus's mouth twitched, and he said angrily, I know that better than you. Mortal. He released Lin, picked up his glass, took a big gulp, looked at Lin with a strange gaze, and chuckled again. Lin's eye twitched, and he said seriously, what exactly do you want to say? Zeus said leisurely, you have quite a few older brothers and sisters too. Lin's expression changed, but he sneered. Unless they want to die. I said that too. Zeus added, gently patting Lin's shoulder, keep it up. What the hell does, keep it up, mean? Lin downed his drink in one go and said to Zeus, you watch it yourself. Oh. Not happy. Another drink. Zeus looked at Lin with a smile. You drink it yourself, don't you have a male wine attendant? That's fake. Ha ha. Lin returned to his bedroom in a good mood, muttering, how is this like the king of the gods? He grumbled softly, then took out his phone and called Gwen. After telling Gwen about the other Spider-Man, Gwen thought for a moment and then agreed. However, she set the meeting place at the New Crete Clinic. Lin was a little surprised, but he still agreed. The current task is finally temporarily concluded, just waiting for the harvest. Lin's eyes flickered, and he threw himself onto the bed. There should be no surprises with Raven and Logan, results should come within a few days, or even sooner. What Lin was concerned about was the series of consequences that might arise after the information about Alien Island was disseminated, and William Stryker's reaction. William Stryker, who intensely hated mutants, upon discovering that he had been abandoned by the military, and with the extermination of mutants as his lifelong pursuit, what would he do without the military's support? Would he leave unwillingly, or would he gamble again? Lin, without any hesitation, arrived at the answer. Gamble again. The obsession with exterminating mutants had been held for most of his life, it was impossible to give it up easily. In this world, he was probably the only one who truly understood how much William Stryker hated mutants. If William Stryker chose to gamble, what would he do? Several thoughts flashed through Lin's mind, and he chuckled softly. I hope your choice doesn't disappoint me. The next day, Lin received a message from Tony early in the morning. Some data and a large amount of evidence from Alien Island had already been uploaded to the internet. These materials and evidence had several distribution points, and once released, they would spread and replicate wildly. With Tony's methods, these materials wouldn't stop until everyone knew about them. It will only take a little time to get results. But, do you really want to leave your name on those materials? Yes. Lin nodded. Hearing no response from Tony, he continued, don't worry, this isn't just to draw hatred, it's also good for me. Lin, who had solved the nuclear bomb crisis, made another move, exposing the military's cruel experiments. Lin had already thought of relevant titles and was ready to harvest a wave of faith power. Since you said so, I understand, Tony said and then hung up the phone. This guy, though a bit sharp-tongued, really goes all out to help people. Lin murmured, a hint of emotion flashing in his eyes. When these materials and evidence spread uncontrollably, what would the military and William Stryker's reactions be? It had only been a few days since the Battle of New York ended. The military hadn't even resolved the issues caused by the nuclear bomb, and now the Alien Island incident occurred. Tisk, the military's credibility and image will fall to a new low. Lin mumbled, his mood quite pleasant. Once the Alien Island data spread, even if Lin's name wasn't left in those materials and evidence, Stryker would surely guess who the instigator was. After all, he and Tony were the ones who dismantled Alien Island. Between Tony and him, who would Stryker hate more? It would definitely be him, as a mutant. Since that was the case, he might as well openly take on all the hostility and hatred, give Tony some peace, and harvest a wave of faith power for himself. So, how will you deal with me? Lin murmured, secretly becoming vigilant. However, he still had other things to do now. Arranging the inner world. The current inner world was empty, practically wasting the space. After breakfast, Lin rushed between New York City and its surrounding areas, frantically purchasing various supplies and stuffing all sorts of resources into the inner world. But the inner world's current space was limited, so he was very restrained. At least, he only bought a 2-story wooden house and put it inside. As night fell, Lin, who had been busy all day, arrived at the Crete clinic again. Gwen and Peter, the 2 little spider monks, were going to meet here, and Lin was Gwen's designated witness. Lin had been busy all day and prepared a plate of egg fried rice to reward himself, but just as he fed the first bite into his mouth. Bang bang bang. Lin looked at the knocking window. A black and white Spider-Man was squatting on the 2nd floor windowsill, waving at him. Lin looked at her helplessly. After opening the window, Gwen climbed in like a large spider. Can't you just use the main door? Lin said helplessly. I'm Spider-Woman, how can I use the main door? What if someone sees me? Gwen rolled her eyes and took off her mask. Spider-Woman. Lin raised an eyebrow and teased, you've only been wearing this spider suit for a few days, I haven't seen you in the news yet. At most, you're a street Spider-Woman right now. What street Spider-Woman? That sounds terrible. Gwen unceremoniously sat at the dining table, pulled Lin's egg fried rice over, and stuffed it into her mouth. Delicious. Gwen praised, giving Lin a thumbs up. Lin smiled and ruffled Gwen's head, you didn't have dinner either. I did, but fighting crime is exhausting. Gwen said with a grin. After a few spoonfuls, her cheeks were puffed up like a little hamster. Lin shook his head helplessly and returned to the kitchen, making another plate of egg fried rice with the leftover rice. So satisfying. Gwen rubbed her belly, her eyes narrowed like a lazy cat, her face full of happy contentment. Lin ate his fried rice and asked Gwen, do you want to meet the other Spider-Man as your true self? Or, of course not as my true self. Gwen said righteously, you knowing my identity is enough. He hasn't earned my trust yet. Even having the same abilities didn't mean anything. Just then, Gwen's spider sense warned her, or rather, it sensed a special attraction. He's here. Gwen exclaimed, quickly pulling up her mask and putting it on. Lin raised an eyebrow and looked directly at the window. Sure enough. The next second, a red and blue Spider-Man appeared on the windowsill, raising his hand, ready to knock on the window. Seeing Lin's gaze sweep over him, Peter's body stiffened, and he put his raised hand on his head. He. Peter let out an awkward laugh. Lin opened the window again and let the red and blue Spider-Man in. The moment Peter entered, his eyes and Gwen's seemed to stick together. Lin watched this scene, his expression full of amusement. Indeed, because of the spider that gave them both their powers, the two had a special connection. Cough. Lin suddenly coughed lightly, startling the 2 youngsters awake. They looked at each other again. Cool suit. Ugly suit. As the words came out, Peter smiled somewhat awkwardly. Sorry. Why sorry? You didn't do anything wrong. Gwen watched Peter with her arms crossed, feeling that the person under the mask must be kind. Peter looked at Gwen, feeling that she must be a very understanding person. But your suit is really too ugly. Gwen scrutinized Peter. Peter said pitifully, I don't know how to make one. This is the most suitable combination I could find. Hey. Gwen chuckled softly, then suddenly said, I'll make you a suit as a gift. She had studied fashion design, so making a suit wasn't difficult for her. This isn't good. Peter felt a bit embarrassed. It's a small matter. Gwen smiled, if I need your help in the future, you must be there immediately, okay? Okay. Peter agreed without hesitation. Seeing the 2 youngsters getting along well, Lin cleaned up the dishes and walked towards the kitchen. A moment later, as Lin finished washing the dishes and was about to check on how the 2 youngsters were chatting, he suddenly felt a large amount of faith power continuously pouring into the inner world. Were the released pieces of evidence starting to take effect? A hint of surprise flashed in Lin's eyes. He strode out of the kitchen and said to the 2 spider monks, since you 2 have met, you can find time to chat more later. No, you can't. Gwen wagged a finger in front of her face, her playful look like a cunning little fox wearing a mask. He said you have a small world, and I want to see it. What a mess. This was Gwen's first impression of Lynn's inner world when she entered it. Is this your junkyard? Gwen stared blankly at Lynn. Trees and flowers scattered everywhere, all sorts of jumbled rocks, sand, tools, and even a few cows and sheep running around joyfully. Lynn shrugged, looking at the things scattered in every corner of the inner world, and said helplessly, I just bought these today, and I haven't had time to arrange them yet. Peter pointed to a two-story wooden house not far away and asked curiously, was that bought too? Yes, I bought it in the countryside. Lynn responded to the two while sensing the situation of the Lake of Faith. At this moment, the water representing the power of faith was continuously increasing, and as time passed, the rate of increase became faster and faster. If this continued, the Lake of Faith, originally used to store the power of faith, would soon overflow. Lynn pondered for a moment, then closed his eyes under the curious gaze of Gwen and Peter. Changes began to appear within the inner world. First, the Lake of Faith doubled in size. Next, in pursuit of efficiency, Lynn generously consumed some of the power of faith to arrange the inner world. The scattered items throughout the inner world seemed to be grabbed by invisible large hands, placing them in various positions according to Lynn's will. In just a few tens of seconds, the inner world transformed. The wooden house was placed not far from the Lake of Faith. Various fruit trees were placed in an open space south of the Lake of Faith, forming a small fruit orchard, while other trees were scattered at the edge of the inner world. The cows and sheep he had bought on a whim were placed in the west, enclosed by an invisible wall of chi. The various flowers he had bought were arranged near the wooden house, and some of the birds he had purchased were released into the fruit orchard. Lynn scanned the inner world, frowned, and whispered, it feels like something is still missing. He thought for a few seconds, and after consuming some power of faith, a winding stream appeared in the inner world. Finally, it has some vitality. Lynn nodded in satisfaction. However, Lynn also knew very well that he had only bought some things, thrown them into the inner world, and then placed them in position. To build the inner world into the planned Garden of Eden, a complete ecosystem suitable for the inner world needed to be established. This required more professional people and more power of faith. As long as there was power of faith, the inner world could create almost anything belonging to the natural world, except for conscious life and artificial objects. Lynn even felt it wasn't like creation, it was more like the inner world, since its birth, had a massive accompanying material library. As long as the power of faith was paid, corresponding items could be found in the database and then fully materialized. The power of faith is everything in the inner world. Lynn murmured again. What kind of ability is this? Gwen looked at what was happening before her in disbelief. This is truly incredible. Peter exclaimed in admiration, unable to help but sigh, if only I had such a small world, I could use it as a secret base. Ever since he decided to become Spider-Man, he had hidden many small secrets in his room, constantly worrying that May would discover them. Gwen nodded in agreement, then suddenly lowered her voice and quietly asked Lynn. Can we build a secret base here? Lynn raised an eyebrow and said, space is limited right now, so not yet, unless you are my believers. Believers. Gwen blinked, belief, in you. Lynn pondered and said, it's not necessarily about believing in me as a person. Those who believe in or identify with my ideals, share the same goal as me, and are willing to fight for it, can also become my believers. They could also provide him with the power of faith. Lynn silently added in his heart. Hearing this, Gwen and Peter showed thoughtful expressions. Peter suddenly asked, what are your goals and ideals? Lynn did not answer, but instead asked, how do you view mutants? Gwen immediately said, they are very dangerous. This was the view of most people. Because some mutants lose control when their abilities awaken, causing no small amount of chaos. Some mutants, upon discovering their superpowers, even want to become Homelander, and the reputation of mutants is getting worse precisely because of the existence of this group of people. Peter nodded in agreement, then added, they are also very pitiful. He had seen a mutant whose appearance had changed. She was pitifully rummaging through a trash can, yet people were still chasing and beating her, even though she had done nothing wrong. Listening to their answers, Lin said seriously, not only that, in the eyes of some people, mutants are resources, biological experimental subjects that provide various raw materials. Hearing this, Peter and Gwen were shocked. Experimental materials, resources. These words could not possibly be associated with people. Lin smiled slightly and continued, no matter how one views mutants, it is undeniable that mutants have great potential, they all have the potential to become heroes. He paused slightly, then said loudly. This world needs more heroes. Therefore, I plan to build this place into a world that can accommodate mutants. The two looked at Lin in shock, feeling that Lin at this moment exuded a charm that came from confidence. That sounds too difficult. Gwen sighed. It is difficult, but it is worth it. Lin said lightly to Peter and Gwen, all right, it's getting late, you can go back now. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for them to respond, the two were sent out of the inner world. The two youngsters' eyes blurred, and they appeared in the living room. They exchanged glances, and Gwen couldn't help but say, I thought he would invite us to join. Peter shook his head. Mr. Crit probably still thinks we're not ready, not worthy enough. He didn't even have a proper battle suit yet. Creating a world. That's so cool. Gwen praised, then suddenly said, if Lin really succeeds, wouldn't it be a good thing for this world? Peter shook his head, I don't know, but for mutants, it will definitely be a good thing. The two exchanged glances, chatted for a couple more sentences, and after leaving their contact information, they left Crete Clinic. A moment later, Lin walked out of the inner world, picked up his phone, and began to check relevant information about Alien Island. Just by typing in the words, Alien Island, a flood of information poured out. Whether it was news media, video websites, or social software, the data and information about Alien Island were spreading wildly, and the spread was unstoppable. And with the spread of Alien Island's information, the name, Lin, once again appeared in people's sight. Now, the entire online world had completely gone mad, and along with it, the military and Stryker had also gone mad. Inside a military base. General Stryker. Please come with us. Give me some time, I have some things to arrange. Stryker said calmly, and without waiting for the FBI agents outside the door to refuse, he closed his office door. The moment the door closed, an expressionless woman blocked the office doorway, exuding a cold killing intent, preventing everyone from entering. Inside the office. Stryker looked at the lingering night outside the window and couldn't help but murmur, can't they even wait this long? These short-sighted idiots. His eyes flickered, filled with intense unwillingness. He, of course, knew what he would experience if he was taken away. Those idiots would strip him of everything. His identity, freedom, resources, and lifelong pursuit. Not only that, he would also be pushed out as a criminal to bear those responsibilities, to salvage the military's image, and even some fabricated charges would be pinned on him, making him take the blame. But, where was his crime? Did the military truly not know what he was doing? Hey! Stryker chuckled softly. He had actually miscalculated. He hadn't expected that disgusting, mutant Lin, to produce irrefutable evidence. The data was real, the events were real, and that, him, was also real in a sense. That, him, if he remembered correctly, was an experiment, lost by Sentinel services some time ago. He hadn't expected them to meet. Accident. Stryker smiled and shook his head, a fierce glint flashing in his eyes. He had never hated accidents so much. If on Alien Island, if his experiment had been strong enough to take down Iron Man and that Lin, none of this would have happened. If he hadn't had so many scruples, if he had acted first when those two returned, if, there are no more, ifs. Stryker cut off the jumbled thoughts in his head, picked up a private phone, and dialed a number. Are you crazy? Calling me at a time like this? As soon as the call connected, a deep voice rang out. Trask, I had someone send all my data to you. We have a common pursuit. Perhaps that data can help your research. Hearing this, the person on the other end of the phone was silent for a moment, then said faintly, so, you shouldn't have made this call. I just wanted to confirm again, whether you truly align with what I pursue. Mutants are a threat to humanity. For the sake of humanity, I will definitely eliminate this threat. Good, very good. Stryker responded, reminding him, there will be no more X-143 extract in the future. If those controlled mutants cannot be controlled further, let them serve their final purpose soon. You don't need to tell me that. As his voice faded, a busy signal rang out. Stryker exhaled deeply, disposed of the phone, and pulled open the office door. Looking at the FBI agents, who were on edge and eager to rush in, he gave them a slight smile. Don't be nervous, she's very fast, you won't feel any pain. No sooner had he spoken than the death woman, who was blocking the doorway, waved her hand at the agents in front of her, and her sharp adamantium claws slashed across the necks of several agents, turning them into corpses. Go. Stryker said calmly, leading the death woman away quickly. He hadn't lost yet. Ding ding ding. Lin was awakened by the alarm clock, then suddenly opened his eyes, a look of shock flashing through them, and without a word, he dove into his inner world. The inner world had grown, and not by just a little. The original inner world, compared to the current one, only occupied a small central section. The lake of faith had long been filled with water transformed by the power of faith, and the excess power of faith was directly absorbed by the inner world to expand it. And in the time since he woke up, the power of faith was still pouring in frantically, and after being absorbed by the inner world, it was continuously expanding at a visible rate. In one night, the diameter reached 1,600 meters. The diameter expanded tenfold. Lin was incredibly shocked, then he lightly clenched his fist, feeling the power feedback from the inner world, and gently let out a breath. It was nearly twice as strong as before, and this was just the inner world's power feedback to him, not including the power brought by the growth of his Cosmo. Cosmo. Lin closed his eyes and felt it, his expression becoming strange. Still hasn't broken through to the sixth sense. Although he knew that the cosmos' transitions to new stages were qualitative changes, even a kind of biological ascension, the amount of power of faith needed was too much, wasn't it? Lin sighed in his heart. However, the power of faith was still pouring in frantically, and the speed of influx was even increasing, with the amount pouring in each second continuously growing. This change is too obvious. Amidst his surprise, Lin stepped out of his inner world and opened his computer to search for information related to Alien Island. A moment later, Lin's mouth twitched uncontrollably. Things had developed somewhat unexpectedly. No wonder so much power of faith is pouring in. Lin couldn't help but exclaim. The wounds left by the Battle of New York had not yet healed, and Lin's feat of stopping the nuclear bomb explosion had not faded, and was even being constantly brought up by a large number of people, who regarded him as a hero who saved New York and a large number of lives from the military. Now, the exposure of the Alien Island incident also involved the military and Lin. In a short period, two extremely shocking events piled up, generating an unexpected chemical reaction. Now, Lin was not only called a hero but also became a symbol of resisting the dark side of the military, exposing the military's unrighteous actions, and fighting against tyranny. This change had completely exceeded Lin's expectations. And in the next 10 odd days, the development of events completely spiraled out of control, even becoming fantastical. The meaning represented by the symbol, Lin, was still expanding. Courage, defiance of tyranny, saving lives, resisting injustice, even two gangs before a shootout would shout, Lin. Lin seemed to be not just a name, but was transforming into a symbol and a certain spirit, and in a short time, this brought Lin a massive, colossal, enormous amount of power of faith. The lake of faith in Lin's inner world expanded again and again, and the inner world space also grew again and again, and it was a mad growth. Finally, after another 2 days, the inner world's diameter broke through 100 kilometers. Yes, 100 kilometers, expanding from 160 meters to 100 kilometers. And just as the inner world's diameter reached 100 kilometers, the inner world's level finally rose to a new height. And this meant that the inner world's power system also completed a leap, representing Lin's breakthrough of the fifth sense, reaching the realm of the sixth sense. Inside Lin's inner world. Is this what the sixth sense feels like? Lin felt the changes within him, and even though he was mentally prepared for the transformation after breaking through to the sixth sense, he was still astonished. This was a difference of heaven and earth. Without the power of the inner world, even if Lin was at the critical state of the fifth sense, he wouldn't be able to break the sound barrier. But after breaking through to the sixth sense, his starting speed was supersonic. Not only his speed, but his strength, spirit, and physical defense capabilities also reached a terrifying level. With the foundation of the sixth sense, and the further augmentation from his inner world, Lin's power could ascend another level. And these were merely physical changes. The biggest difference after breaking through to the sixth sense, compared to the fifth sense, was the ability to ignite one's cosmo and use its power in combat. The sixth sense is the formal starting point for igniting and utilizing cosmo, signifying that a cosmo practitioner is no longer a mere foot soldier, but has officially stepped into the threshold of a saint. In combat, a saint who has broken through to the sixth sense no longer relies purely on physical strength. Their attacks begin to contain the energy of the cosmo, capable of pulverizing matter to an atomic level. And this is merely a common ability shared by every cosmo practitioner after stepping into the sixth sense. Lin's face was filled with awe. But the next second, his expression became strange. After breaking through the sixth sense, every saint can sense their guardian constellation and resonate with it, even imbuing their attacks with the characteristics of that guardian constellation. But which constellation would he resonate with? There were no constellations in the inner world at all, let alone resonating with one. He didn't think the so-called sensing of a guardian constellation would be a constellation from the outside world. Lin's mouth twitched uncontrollably. If there isn't even a guardian constellation, then what about the cloths corresponding to the constellations? As Lin spoke, he felt a sense of relief. He hadn't even started forging the cloths yet. It was a bit too early to consider this. Moreover, besides him, no one else had broken through to the sixth sense yet. Lin looked up at the sky of his inner world, a thoughtful look flashing in his eyes. Constellations and cloths, huh? Constellations were easy enough, it was just a matter of slowly creating them by expending the power of faith. But how should the cloths be forged? Lin pondered for a moment, communicating with his inner world. A moment later, a look of pleasant surprise flashed in his eyes. When the Cosmo power system was born in the inner world, the cloths, as an indispensable part of this power system, naturally would not be absent. The cloths were not just armor, they were imbued with life. From the moment the Cosmo power system was born in the inner world, the spirits of these cloths were born along with it within the inner world. It only required the appearance of corresponding guardian constellations in the inner world and the forging of cloth shells to house the spirits of the cloths. Then, the spirits of the cloths would merge with them, giving birth to true cloths. Lin stroked his chin, lost in thought. So, he still needed a craftsman to help him forge the shells to house the spirits of the cloths. Why does it feel like the artifact spirits in cultivation novels? Lin couldn't help but mutter. Could it be that this Cosmo power system, born from my memories, also drew inspiration from cultivation novels when it was being nurtured by the inner world? He whispered to himself. Forging cloths required 3 raw materials: orichalcum, gominium, and stardust sand. Materials were not an issue, the inner world, plus the power of faith, could handle it. However, the craftsmanship for forging cloth shells was complex, and it required a highly skilled artisan. An artisan. Lin immediately thought of Tony, who created the Iron Man suit. But the creation of cloths was far more complex than the Iron Man suit, and if it involved non-natural powers, Tony wasn't the most suitable candidate. As for an artisan, Hephaestus, the god of fire. Lin mused, a thoughtful look flashing in his eyes. However, since he couldn't forge a true cloth for now, perhaps he and Tony could collaborate to create a pseudo-cloth. He remembered that in the world of saints, there were even technologically simulated iron cloths. Thinking too far ahead, thinking too far ahead. Lin shook his head with a smile, spent some time clearing the jumbled thoughts in his mind, and finally began to examine the superpower he had awakened after breaking through to the sixth sense. Every saint awakens a superpower when breaking through to the sixth sense, and the awakened superpower is influenced by various factors. Individual aptitude and beliefs, cultivation methods and lineage, as well as the guardian constellation sensed, all can influence the awakened superpower. But Lin currently had no guardian constellation, had not undergone cultivation, and had not yet determined his beliefs. Lin's expression almost couldn't hold. Why do I feel a bit useless? Lin muttered softly, then a smile appeared on his face. However, He didn't need any guardian constellation, nor did he need cultivation, because he was the lord of the inner world. Lin's eyes flickered, and an extremely brilliant light appeared deep within them. This is my ability. Lin was stunned, an intrigued expression appearing on his face, and with a single step, he left the inner world. At this moment, it was dawn, and a sliver of white light had just appeared on the horizon. It's already been a whole night. Lin said, a little surprised. He had been completely immersed in the process of his inner world's upgrade and hadn't noticed the passage of time at all. Lin took out his phone to check the time, took a shower, changed his clothes, and was about to make breakfast when his phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Lin answered the call, and a voice he hadn't heard in a long time sounded. Lin, we need help. Raven said anxiously, then quickly told Lin the general situation and their current location. Lin's expression became serious, and he quickly walked towards the balcony. He was going to meet his first batch of mutant followers. Although the distance was a bit far, at his current speed, he should be able to make it. He stood on the balcony, identified the direction, and after slowly flying above the apartment, accompanied by a sonic boom, he quickly disappeared into the air. Lin flew at high speed in the sky, the air currents generated by his flight tearing the clouds to shreds. Mach 1, Mach 2, Lin's speed became faster and faster, until it reached Mach 5, when his continuously increasing speed finally slowed down. Lin smiled with satisfaction. He had only just broken through to the sixth sense. As long as the inner world continued to expand, his cosmo would also grow stronger, and with the augmentation of both, his speed would further increase. As he saw that he was getting closer to the location Raven mentioned, Lin remembered what Raven had just said. Raven and Logan had rescued a large number of mutants, and these mutants had all firmly expressed that they would become his followers, fighting to create a mutant world. But, Lin felt the continuously increasing power of faith within his inner world, and he began to wonder if he could change his original plan. Change the original plan. Lin pondered the question in his mind. Originally, he had intended to first convert the suffering mutants into his followers, collecting their faith power, and then, through a large number of mutant superheroes, collect the faith power of humans. But now, all this faith power came from humans, from the gains brought by his superhero identity as Lin. As long as he maintained the superhero image of Lin, faith power would flow continuously, and even increase. Under this premise, if he got involved in various incidents to rescue mutants, how would those who viewed mutants as a threat perceive him? How much faith power would he lose? But when this thought arose, the faces of Raven and Logan, and the two faith crystals he had thrown into the lake of faith, appeared before his eyes. He seemed to have, unknowingly, taken on a responsibility that carried the hopes of others. Lin sighed. Then, the plan remains unchanged. Lin murmured, a smile suddenly appearing on his face. At most, it was temporarily losing some faith, just taking a few extra steps. If the entire mutant community became his followers, he would have many more followers in the future, and not just limited to Earth. Moreover, his intuition told him that Lin, becoming a symbol and acquiring some symbolic meaning, besides the subtle reaction caused by the nuclear bomb incident in Alien Island, was also due to people and forces secretly fanning the flames. Pushing him to such a height in a short time. Who did it? What did they want? So hard to guess. A playful smile appeared on Lin's face as he accelerated to his limit and flew towards his destination. At the same time, Raven and Logan, with a large number of mutants, were running through a forest towards New York. More precisely, they were fleeing. Raven and Logan's original plan was simply to rescue all the mutants in the experimental base where Raven had been before. But after they rescued the mutants from that base, they discovered that there were many such bases. So, after discussing with Logan, Raven temporarily changed her decision and took the rescued mutants to rescue the mutants from the next base. Thus, in just over 10 days, after destroying 4 Sentinel Services bases, the number of rescued mutants actually exceeded 200. During the entire rescue process, some mutants involved in the rescue died, and some fled. The mutants who persevered until now were all truly pursuing the will to establish a mutant world and were determined to become Lin's followers. Raven and Logan had turned these 10+ days into a test. A test for themselves, and a test for these mutant followers. And now, the final moment of this test was about to arrive. Suddenly, Logan's eyes narrowed, and he said coldly, "They're coming after us." No sooner had he spoken than a large number of metallic figures appeared not far from the fleeing mutants, surrounding them in a pincer movement. Seeing this, Raven couldn't help but whisper, "It's all my fault. We shouldn't have gone to that base last night. That base yesterday was a trap set by Sentinel services for them. It not only had no mutants but a large number of Sentinels. If Logan hadn't desperately covered their retreat, holding back a large number of Sentinels, there would be even more mutants now. Don't think about useless things. Think about how to hold on until Lin returns." Logan said coldly, his adamantium claws extending from his fingers. Raven nodded, her eyes narrowing, her hands tightly clenched into fists. Seeing this, the mutants following behind the two of them, without any hesitation, also prepared to fight to the death. Watching this scene, Logan and Raven's eyes flashed with relief. "Be careful," Logan shouted to the mutants behind him. The next second, a blue beast in the crowd shouted loudly, "Everyone, pay attention to helping those around you. These Sentinels have detailed information on our abilities, and they will formulate combat strategies targeting different superpowers." Hank McCoy, whom they called Beast, was one of the more outstanding individuals among these mutants. Not only was his combat power good, but he was also very intelligent. Raven shouted delicately, "Everyone. Hold on. My God. Lin is on his way." Hearing this, a glimmer of light appeared in the eyes of all the mutants. During this time, through Raven's indoctrination, these people had come to regard Lin as their only hope. "Stay behind me. Be safe. Survive," Logan roared, charging forward first. Compared to other mutants, his speed was very fast, so fast that by the time other mutants had run a few steps, he had already rushed to a sentinel 100 meters away. Each of these sentinels was over 3 meters tall, looking like giant robots, and each sentinel carried a large number of weapons. When fighting different targets, these sentinels would use different weapons, and would even temporarily replace them with more targeted weapons before each operation. Logan glanced at the sentinel in front of him, noticing that it was somewhat different from the sentinels they had fought last night. And this sentinel had a metal canister on its back. This was, after last night's battle, they changed to new weapons before chasing them. Weapons targeting him. Logan bared his teeth, a fierce, beast-like glint in his eyes. Weapons. Could they kill him? Logan didn't hesitate for a moment, following his beastly instincts, his adamantium claws glinting coldly in the dawn light as he slashed at one of the sentinel's legs. And the sentinel also moved. As Logan cut off one of its legs, large quantities of pale yellow-green liquid sprayed from the sentinel's hands. Logan quickly dodged, but some of the liquid still got on him. Immediately, a strong burning sensation appeared on his body. Strong acid. And not just ordinary strong acid. In just a blink of an eye, the skin that had unfortunately been splattered with acid turned completely charred, even exposing raw, red flesh. Logan's eyes narrowed, and he quickly roared, "Everyone be careful. These things can spray strong acid." Puff, puff, puff. More acid sprayed from the palms of the sentinel robots, enveloping Logan. Logan's body flashed, dodging the spray. With his speed, dodging was not difficult. But Logan saw that the surrounding sentinel robots had all opened their hands, spraying acid while slowly walking towards the mutants. Did these things want to melt them all? Logan's eyes turned red. Like a beast that had lost its mind, he actually charged forward, straight into the spraying acid. There was no time to waste with these things. He had to tear a hole in the sentinel's encirclement as quickly as possible. It was bone-chilling and scorching. The acid continuously corroded Logan's body, almost turning him into a bloody mess. Every second, his skin would turn charred black, flaking off his body as black ash, but the next second, as blood seeped out, his skin would be restored by his powerful self-healing ability. This cycle repeated, and Logan was enduring pain akin to being constantly flayed alive. But the pain only made him more frenzied. His eyes were bloodshot, and he roared, continuously launching attacks. Each swing of his adamantium claws caused immense damage to the sentinel robots, and in just a few swipes, he could take down a sentinel. Because of his frantic assault, the puppet masters behind the sentinels immediately dispatched more sentinels to besiege Logan, simultaneously changing their attack method. Those sentinels, while spraying acid, began to shoot at Logan. Tat tat tat. The sound of gunfire merged into a single roar, like a metal storm swirling towards Logan, attempting to halt his advance. Logan was struck by a volley of bullets, and as gruesome wounds erupted across his body, his sprinting speed instantly plummeted. Logan cursed under his breath, but could only dodge the bullets. Thus, it took him more time to take down each sentinel. And right now, time was what he needed most. Logan watched as the torn encirclement was once again blocked by two sentinels, a look of anxiety appearing in his eyes. He turned to glance at the mutant crowd behind him. As the sentinels continuously tightened their encirclement, the mutants had fallen into a dangerous situation. Although Raven was there, coordinating with the mutants for defense, not all mutants possessed formidable combat power. The reason the sentinels kept spraying acid and didn't directly attack with more lethal weapons was that they still wanted to capture these mutants alive. This was something not only Logan realized, but many among the mutants also understood. To be captured again as experimental subjects, endure various cruel experiments daily, living a life worse than death, without any hope. No. I won't be captured again. Don't think you can make us die without any value in pain and darkness. Beast Hank McCoy roared, pointing at the sentinels and shouting, fight them to the death. Take them down. Everyone, hold on. My God is coming soon. God, I beg for your help. The mutants either roared or prayed, but not a single one fled. This trial, which Raven and Logan had spent over 10 days on, centered on faith, dreams, and survival, had ultimately filtered out the believers Lynn needed. The next moment, the mutants followed Hank and Raven, launching an attack. Acid fell upon them, and the burning pain made them wail, but remembering the outcome of being captured, this pain made them utterly crazy. They would rather die than lie back on an operating table as experimental subjects, to feel the terror of a scalpel cutting through their bodies. Watching this scene, Logan and Raven's eyes turned red. These mutants were not only the believers they sought for Lynn, but also fellow beings who shared their plight and could empathize the most, their compatriots. At this moment, even the usually calm Raven was somewhat blinded by fury. Logan, let's break out together. Raven charged towards Logan, and together they attacked the sentinels, aiming to shatter the encirclement. She and Logan rushed at the sentinels from left and right. As Logan tore through a sentinel's body, shredding its head, Raven appeared on another sentinel. Ah! She ripped off the acid container on the sentinel's back and hurled the acid container at another sentinel. The next second, her body, as if boneless, instantly slid onto the sentinel's arm, erupting with terrifying strength. She used brute force to control the sentinel's continuously firing arm, aiming it at the acid container still in midair. Tat tat tat. The metal storm tore apart the acid container, and a large amount of acid splashed in all directions, falling onto several surrounding sentinels. Raven deftly dodged using the sentinel's body, but still accidentally got a few drops of acid on her. The intense pain made her gasp, and just as she was about to forcefully control the sentinel's arm to use its weapon to kill other sentinels, that sentinel suddenly stopped moving. The people from Sentinel Services were constantly controlling the actions of these sentinels. Raven cursed under her breath, and could only tear off the sentinel's head. This scene was faithfully transmitted by the sentinel to the Sentinel Services base hundreds of kilometers away. Seeing this, Trask, the head of Sentinel Services, sneered. How foolish. Did they think that when he created these sentinels, he wouldn't anticipate these situations? Every sentinel in this series was remotely controlled by his soldiers, allowing for timely feedback on enemy reactions and actions that suited the battle situation. For example, now, Trask coldly scanned the real-time combat footage of the sentinels and said mercilessly, once those mutants lose their combat ability, cease the attack. He had spent time capturing these mutants one by one for the next phase of the Sentinel robots. If they all died, although their corpses could still provide some value, living mutants were ultimately more useful. Trask watched the battle footage between the Sentinels and the mutants, observing the expressions of those mutants, and was inwardly amazed by their performance. This is what humanity is, this is the power of will and faith. He wasn't actually like Stryker, who intensely hated mutants due to certain experiences. On the contrary, he greatly admired the mutants' abilities. He believed mutants were saviors of humanity, capable of developing various new weapons, medicines, and so on through mutant mutations. This was a gift from heaven to humanity, an extremely precious resource. But mutants were also a common enemy of humanity, the ultimate enemy to jointly fight and oppose. He knew the immense potential of mutants, and thus harbored an indescribable fear of them. Now, seeing the reactions of these mutants, his fear increased even further. Because these mutants had faith, hope, and a God who could unite them. And creatures with faith and hope would unleash terrifying potential. However, who was their God? A thought flashed through Trask's mind. Looking at the already formed encirclement and the mutants wailing in the acid, he let out a long sigh of relief. What a pity, he didn't get to see the God they spoke of. No matter who their God was, it seemed he had won this time. Just as a thought had barely formed in Trask's mind, he saw a figure suddenly appear in the footage transmitted by the Sentinel. The next moment, when a brilliant yet not dazzling light appeared among the mutants, Trask stared, stunned by what was happening. Seconds before, these 213 mutants didn't know what hope was, and had even fallen into complete despair. Before today, they had no concept of a so-called God. But now, God had an image in their hearts, and hope was rekindled within them. Lin. This was their God. Lin stood among the mutants, one hand raised above his head, brilliant light gushing from his palm, only to explode dozens of meters high, turning into a golden rain, forming a hemispherical light curtain that enveloped everyone. And when these brilliant raindrops fell on them, all the injuries on the mutants' bodies began to heal, their acid-corroded skin recovering at a visible rate. Lin. Raven cried out in surprise, her eyes filled with relief. They had finally held on until Lin arrived. Logan spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva, a smile appearing on his face as he looked at the miraculous scene behind him. It seemed he had made the right choice this time. Logan and Raven exchanged glances, and after pulling away from the Sentinel robots in front of them, quickly retreated to Lin's side. The golden light rain fell on both of them. Logan felt nothing but a sense of comfort, but Raven watched as the corroded wounds on her body quickly disappeared, revealing a happy smile. Just then, the Sentinels, who had temporarily stopped moving due to Lin's appearance, began to move again under Trask's command. Trask looked at Lin with fervent eyes, exclaiming excitedly, "Capture this mutant at all costs." This ability was simply miraculous. If he could thoroughly study this person's abilities, the entire world would change because of it. At this thought, Trask's breathing became rapid. Those things are starting again. Logan looked at the reactivated Sentinels, coldly warning them, his adamantium claws extending once more. The mutants whose injuries had healed gathered around Lin, surrounding him in the center. Under the brilliant light curtain, Lin still held his hand high, and everyone watched this scene, engraving it deep into their souls. The mutants looked at Lin, their eyes fervent and devout. They had prayed to many gods, but in the end, the only one who answered them was Lin. At this moment, they feared nothing. Because their God was with them. "Don't worry, I'm here." Lin looked at the Sentinels and said faintly. Dozens of Sentinels aimed their weapons at all the mutants present, and just as these Sentinels were about to fire, Lin's open palm clenched tightly. Immediately, the light curtain in midair paused slightly, and what fell down was no longer healing light rain, but rather light arrows. ZZZZTZZZZTZZZZT. Seemingly endless light arrows rained down from midair, engulfing the Sentinel robots. This was the last image Trask saw. He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with extreme complexity. Fear, longing, admiration. Is this the God these mutants keep talking about? Trask murmured, a serious look flashing in his eyes, but he scoffed at the title, God. He admitted this person was strong, but he was just a very strong mutant. God. If he were God, he would have come long ago. He murmured, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He remembered these mutants calling this God by the name Lin. Lin. The Lin praised by everyone recently. The Lin who forced Stryker out of the military. Are they the same person? Trask pushed up the glasses on his nose, then chuckled. From what he knew of Stryker, being outsmarted by a mutant, he would absolutely not let it go, and it was even possible that he had already begun his actions when he disappeared from the base. Stryker, you need to work harder. Trask whispered, offering Stryker his most sincere wishes. As long as Stryker captured or killed this Lin, he would have a chance to study him. For now, he pondered for a moment, then told his assistant, tell the heads of all bases to temporarily stop the pursuit of mutants, and furthermore, based on current data, fully prepare for the next generation of Sentinels. His biggest difference from Stryker was that he was a successful businessman. Even without the military's support, his research could still proceed. After Trask issued a series of orders, he jumped out of his chair. His height of only 1.3 meters made him look like a dwarf. But in the eyes of his assistant, he was a brilliant giant. Take Iron Man's Iron Man suit as an example. If Trask could overcome the problem of the arc reactor, he could quickly replicate the Iron Man suit. But it had to be admitted that the arc reactor was truly a groundbreaking achievement. Trask's assistant had a series of thoughts flash through his mind, and he said to Trask, "All right, sir." Meanwhile, in the forest. After Lin eliminated all the Sentinel robots with one strike, his gentle gaze swept over the mutants, finding that they were all looking at him with unusually fervent eyes, and he also felt waves of fervent faith power appearing in his inner world, solidifying into faith crystals and falling into the lake of faith. Faith power couldn't be fooled. At this moment, these mutants truly regarded him as their god. Lin nodded to the mutants. You've worked hard. With just a simple sentence, a deep sense of emotion surged in the mutants' hearts, and many even shed tears on the spot. It was as if children who had suffered grievances had finally found their parents. Lin looked at this scene, feeling a bit emotional himself. He could understand their feelings. Lin, Logan and I have completed our mission. Raven whispered to Lin, and after a moment of hesitation, she said with a face full of regret, "It's my fault, there could have been more people." It was her insistence on starting this trial, her leading people into the trap. You did very well. Lin smiled at Raven, looking at her with gentle eyes, and lightly patted Raven's shoulder. I understand your thoughts, you've worked hard. Raven's eyes reddened, and she felt a warm current surge in her heart. Lin turned to look at Logan, who, however, pouted and waved his hand dismissively. I know what you want to say, I'm not a child. Lin was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, I wanted to tell you that your shirt and pants are completely corroded, do you want to change into a new set? Hearing Lin's reminder, Logan looked down at the tattered pants hanging on his body, and only then did he feel completely exposed and chilly. His old face flushed, and he said angrily, is that even a question? Hurry up and get them out. Why did he always encounter such situations? Whoosh, whoosh. Wow. What a great physique. The surrounding mutants looked at Logan, teasing him one after another. Lin flicked his hand, taking out a set of clothes from his inner world and throwing them to Logan, then turned to everyone and said, Are you ready to see our world? How large is an inner world with a diameter of 100 kilometers? It sounds small, but a rough calculation shows it's nearly 8,000 square kilometers, which is larger than the area of Modu. Standing by the lake of faith in the center and looking into the distance, one finally gets a sense of boundlessness. Is this still your small world? What have you done? Raven looked at the world before her in shock. Lin smiled faintly, merely saying, it's just the beginning. Raven nodded excitedly. Logan turned to look around, and a relaxed smile appeared on his face when he saw a two-story wooden house. Compared to Raven and him, the mutants who entered the inner world for the first time were completely stunned. One moment they were in the forest, but now they were in a grassy field. So, the new world you told us about is a real world. Beast Hank McCoy looked at Raven in shock. All of them had thought that the new world Raven kept talking about was just a place that could accept them, a place where they could live freely like humans under the protection of the god, Lin. But now, a new world. Lin looked at the mutant covered in blue fur, his eyes slightly brightening. You are Mr. Lin, I am Hank McCoy. The blue beast introduced himself to Lin. It really is Beast. Finally, a scientific and academic talent has arrived. Seeing Lin looking at him curiously, Beast Hank scratched his head and said sheepishly, I wasn't like this originally, but the Sentinel Services researchers injected me with some kind of serum, which is why I turned completely blue. He always explained the reason for his blueness to those around him. Hank is very smart, and his strength is also quite good. Raven said solemnly to Lin, then glanced at Beast Hank and added, he also performed very well when rescuing other mutants. Lin nodded. I understand. Lin patted Beast Hank's shoulder. Welcome to the new world. Thank you. Beast Hank looked at Lin excitedly. And with Beast Hank's voice, the mutants, who had recovered from their shock, excitedly began to thank Lin, some even kneeling on the ground and praising Lin. Lin looked at this scene calmly and said, as you can see, this is a new world, so everything needs to start anew. In other words, you need to build a home with your own hands, a home for mutants. Hearing this, the mutants were not disappointed, instead, their hearts were filled with ecstasy. After experiencing discrimination, expulsion, and being deprived of rights and freedom, nothing excited them more than building a home with their own hands. A mutant home, just by silently reciting this name in their hearts, they were filled with infinite motivation. Lin smiled faintly and looked at Hank beside him. Hank, Raven said you are very smart. Can you tell me about your areas of expertise? Beast Hank's face was full of confidence as he said, I hold several doctor degrees in human evolutionary biology, genetics, biochemistry, and mechanics. At the same time, I have also self-studied subjects such as urban construction management, human resources, and psychology. This truly is a talent. Exactly the person most needed at this stage. Lin's eyes lit up slightly. Logan suddenly said faintly, you study so many things, don't you need to rest? 6 hours a day is enough for me to rest, and most things are not difficult when not delving into deep research. Beast Hank looked at Logan in confusion, as if asking, don't you know this? Logan's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but curse under his breath, then asked curiously, you're so smart, how did you still get caught? Hank's expression stiffened, and he turned his head to avoid everyone's gaze, softly saying, I was tricked away and then captured. Logan rubbed Hank's head hard, as if to express his apology. Hank. Lin suddenly spoke. Here. Hank shivered and quickly responded. Lin smiled, no need to be so nervous. Hank smiled sheepishly, but as Lin's next words came out, he became nervous again. The task of building a home is entrusted to you. Ah. Hank looked at Lin in surprise, Mr. Lin, really entrusted to me? Yes. Lin nodded, ability statistics, personnel coordination, construction planning, resource requirements, and so on, all these will temporarily be handled by you. Hank first nodded, but then worriedly said, are so many important matters really to be entrusted to me? Have some confidence in yourself, I have high hopes for you. Lin gently patted Hank's shoulder. Just then, someone in the mutant crowd suddenly shouted. Mr. Lin, my ability is cutting, what can I do? My God, Lin, my ability is generating electricity, I also want to contribute. My ability is. The mutants shouted loudly, wanting to contribute to the construction of the mutant home. Lin raised his eyebrows, and before he could speak, Raven shouted, quiet down, everyone. Instantly, everyone quieted down. In these past 10 odd days, Raven had established strong prestige among these people. Her stern gaze swept over everyone. Later, everyone line up and go to Hank to register. Everyone quickly nodded. Lin raised his eyebrows, thinking this was a good sign. The higher Raven and Logan's prestige, the easier it would be to manage the mutants, especially in situations where it was inconvenient for him to appear. As for him, Lin narrowed his eyes, then suddenly said to Raven and Logan, you brought back a large number of followers this time, you did very well. Raven looked at Lin standing beside her, and suddenly felt a rift appearing between Lin and her. This rift had nothing to do with trust, nor with their shared ideals. She felt that nothing had changed, and Lin's gaze towards her was no different from before, yet the distance between them had, in that instant, widened to an unreachable extent. That was the distance between a king and a guard, and even more so, between a god and a human, and Lin would eventually become the god of the mutants. Just as a series of thoughts flashed through Raven's mind, Logan's eyes flickered, and he lowered his head slightly, calmly saying, this is what we should do. Raven took a deep breath and shouted, this is all by your guidance, my God. Lin looked at the two, a complex look flashing in his eyes, then calmly said, this is a blessing for you. Streaks of golden glowing power of faith, enhanced by Lin's special effects, descended from the sky and landed on Logan and her. Under Lin's control, it enhanced their strength. In just a few seconds, both of them advanced from the advanced stage of the fifth sense to the perfected stage, and a powerful aura subtly emanated from their bodies. Watching this scene, all the mutants' eyes became fervent. This was a divine blessing. Inside the inner world. Over the 10+ days that the inner world continuously expanded, Lin built a warehouse within it and filled it with various resources. Beast Hank circled the warehouse, then approached Lin with a joyful expression, respectfully saying, "These things are enough for our 200+ people to live for a very long time." "That's good." Lin nodded. Seeing Hank's hesitant expression, he asked, "Is there anything else you want to say? Just say it directly." Hearing this, Hank no longer hesitated. He clasped his hands tightly together and said in a deep voice, "To build this place into a self-sufficient town in a short amount of time, we need more resources, even more than we can imagine. All kinds of machinery, building materials, seeds, and livestock, we need a lot." Moreover, this was based on the premise of a small town. If this small town were to expand into a city in the future, the amount of resources needed was beyond his imagination. Haha. Lin chuckled. "Besides these, you also missed the most important resource, people." "Right." Hank paused, then pondered. 213 people are indeed too few, but in the current situation, fewer people also have their advantages, and we are all mutants, so we can't be treated as ordinary people. The abilities of some mutants were very useful in construction. Let's not consider the issue of people for now. Lin mused, then confidently said, "If there are no surprises, more mutants will arrive after some time." It was only 1 week until the people from Olympus arrived. When the gods of Olympus descended, it would prove his identity as the son of Zeus before the entire world. This identity should be very useful. A thought flashed through Lin's mind. More people. Hank was stunned. Seeing Lin's mysterious expression, he immediately felt reverence and said, "I understand." Since his god said there would be more people, then there definitely would be more people. Lin pondered, then continued, "Make a resource list and give it to Raven. I will have Raven handle these matters, and also." He gently patted Hank's shoulder. "Plan this world, make it richer." Hank froze, then asked doubtfully, "You mean? Don't you think it's too monotonous?" Lin pointed to the endless flat grassland in the inner world. Hank's eyes lit up. "I understand." Before he finished speaking, a look of hesitation appeared on his face. "But, doing these things at this stage would waste a lot of resources and manpower, wouldn't it?" In response to this question, Lin simply flicked his finger lightly towards the distance. The next instant, a small mountain rose from the ground like a mushroom after rain, continuously growing taller at an astonishing speed. Hank watched this scene, completely stunned, even doubting if he was hallucinating. "So, this is what you meant by building a new world?" Hank murmured, then said to Lin with a fervent expression. "I will not disappoint you. Give me 1 day, and I will hand you a design plan tomorrow." He would create a miracle with a god. With that, he quickly rushed to the 2-story wooden house. That wooden house was fully equipped with various electrical appliances. As for the energy problem, he had borrowed a reactor from Tony, which could power the various appliances in the wooden house for several years. Speaking of energy, perhaps he should ask Tony for help. Without energy, many things couldn't be done. Although with Hank's ability, he could solve the initial energy problem given some time. If Tony intervened, there would be no more energy worries in the future. Lin murmured, stroking his chin, deciding to go to Tony's place after arranging things here. A moment later, he called Raven and Logan. "Raven, there are some things I need you to do." Lin looked at Raven, a hint of apology flashing in his eyes. Having just completed one mission and immediately embarking on another without rest, he felt like he was becoming a capitalist. Raven keenly noticed the change in Lin's gaze and smiled. "Whatever you command, I will do." Lin looked at the mutants gathered together in the distance, already busy, a smile appearing on his face. Building a town, a city, and even the world of the future, requires many resources. Although he could consume the power of faith to materialize all the necessary resources, there was no need to waste the power of faith on things available externally. The power of faith should be used for other irreplaceable purposes. "You want me to collect resources?" Raven instantly grasped the key point. "Yes." Lin nodded and said to Raven, "No one is more suitable than you." I understand. Raven mused, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. With her abilities, whether by stealing or impersonating others to acquire resources, it was indeed very convenient. Lin looked at Raven's expression, immediately guessed her thoughts, and then let out a laugh. Raven, there's no need, we have money. Raven looked at Lin in confusion, that's not a small sum. We really have money. Lin smiled slightly at Raven, extending his hand in front of her. Under the puzzled gazes of Raven and Logan, his palm slowly opened. Swish swish swish. Brilliant gold dust poured out from Lin's palm like a small river. In just a few breaths, it accumulated into a small golden mountain. Logan and Raven watched this scene in shock. Logan grabbed a handful of gold dust and rubbed it vigorously in his palm, exclaiming, "This is gold." Yes. Lin nodded. Although he couldn't create man-made objects with the power of faith in the inner world, the materialized gold was not refined gold purified by humans, but rather, nuggets, that exist in nature. Nuggets often have very high purity, sufficient for direct trading. This was also the currency Lin used to exchange for other resources, and most importantly, creating this gold did not consume much power of faith. As long as there was enough power of faith, Lin could fill the entire inner world with gold, but doing so would be meaningless. Raven scooped up a handful of gold dust and said happily, I can buy to my heart's content. That's the idea. Lin smiled, you can ask me for more gold anytime. Raven nodded, a sly look flashing in her eyes, and asked, what if they won't sell even if we offer them gold? Lin gave Raven an exasperated look, then that's up to your ability. Hearing this, Raven and Logan couldn't help but laugh. Logan. Lin looked at Logan, from these mutants, pick out a few good ones and train them well. Okay. Logan responded. Lin smiled and said to the two of them, to facilitate your actions, I will grant you permission to freely enter the inner world. Lin pointed his finger at the space between their eyebrows, and a brilliant speck of light entered their brows. After upgrading his inner world, Lin gained a new ability that allowed him to grant others access to his inner world. When he bestowed this permission upon Raven and Logan, both of them felt a subtle connection to the inner world and were stunned. They felt that with just a thought, they could leave this place. And as soon as that thought appeared, they instantly vanished from their original spots. The next second, they reappeared before Lin. Joy surfaced on Raven's and Logan's faces. With the permission Lin granted them, their safety would be greatly guaranteed. Seeing that both were satisfied, Lin, however, said seriously, but be aware, you will reappear in the same place you entered from when you leave again. Raven happily said, this is already amazing. This not only meant they had a safe world they could enter at any time, but also that the entire inner world had become their backing. Logan mused and asked, can we also bring other people in here like you? Or bring some items in? Yes. Lin nodded, adding, but it's limited to people or objects you are in contact with. Joy appeared on their faces. There's one more thing to note. Lin said in an extremely serious tone, when you enter the inner world, there must not be strong energy interference, otherwise the inner world will be unable to determine your location and teleport you in. The further you are from me, the more time it will take to determine your location. Although both of them could now freely enter and exit the inner world like Lin, their methods of entry and exit were completely different. Lin was one with the inner world. No matter when or where, Lin only needed a thought to enter the inner world because the inner world was a part of him. But it was different for those Lin had granted permission to. Their return to the inner world was similar to spatial teleportation, only by determining their location could the inner world teleport them in. We understand. Raven nodded obediently again. Just then, Hank, who had left not long ago, ran back. He looked at Lin, hesitated for a moment, and then asked somewhat nervously, we want to hold a celebration for our upcoming new life, would you like to join us? After witnessing a series of miracles, Lin's image had been infinitely elevated in his heart. He was no longer just a god, but the one true God. Hearing this, Raven and Logan also looked at Lin expectantly. Lin smiled faintly, all right. After enduring long periods of darkness and despair, these mutants needed a carnival to welcome a new future. Although all the mutants were happy about Lin's arrival, they all behaved very restrained, not daring to celebrate too wildly. Lin was aware of this, so after drinking a glass of wine, he left the inner world and returned to the forest where he had dealt with the sentinels. He looked around and found that all the Sentinel wreckage had been recovered, leaving only some traces of battle. They work pretty fast, huh? Lin chuckled softly and flew towards New York. When he arrived in New York, he found an inconspicuous corner, pulled Raven and Logan out of the inner world, allowed them to get new bearings, and then stuffed the bewildered pair back into the inner world. Then, he called Tony, confirmed that Tony was in New York, and then rushed to Stark Tower without stopping. After this period of repair, Stark Tower was almost fully restored, but it hadn't been officially renamed Avengers Tower yet. After the repairs, the tower looks even more like a boot. Lin muttered to himself and landed directly on the top floor. Welcome, Mr. Crit. As soon as he landed, Jarvis's voice rang out. Lin nodded, chatted casually with Jarvis for a couple of sentences, and walked into the top floor living room. Because he had called ahead, Tony was already waiting for Lin in the living room. Seeing Lin enter, Tony walked up to him with a smile, lightly bumped shoulders with Lin, and teased him in a low voice, "You really know how to pick your timing." Lin raised an eyebrow, waiting for Tony's next words. Tony released his hand and snapped his fingers. An Iron Man suit, controlled by Jarvis, appeared before Lin. A pure golden Iron Man suit. Lin glanced at the Iron Man suit, pinched his chin, and asked in confusion, "This suit doesn't seem like your style." "You got it right. This is a gift for you, just finished yesterday." Tony waved at the golden Iron Man suit, and after Jarvis brought it closer to them, he proudly patted the Iron Man suit's chest and said to Lin, "It doesn't have a name yet, do you want to name it?" Lin examined the suit with a strange look in his eyes and asked curiously, "Why is it golden?" Tony opened his mouth, and the scene of Lin stopping the nuclear bomb and saving him couldn't help but flash in his mind. In that moment, he truly felt that Lin was an angel who had saved him from the abyss of despair, a ray of light that brought him hope. But saying something like that, it was too disgusting. Tony shivered and said impatiently, "Stop with the nonsense, just tell me if you want it or not. If not, I'll throw it into the collection vault." Lin smiled and said, "You want to take back something you've given away. Don't dream about it." Tony's lips curled up slightly, almost imperceptibly. Just then, Jarvis's voice rang out. "Mr. Stark, there's a large and continuously multiplying amount of negative news and comments about Lin appearing on the internet again. Should we implement another round of blocking and control?" Tony frowned. While Lin looked at Tony in confusion, "Jarvis, when did this start?" "A week ago." Jarvis's answer plunged Lin into silence. So, for a week now, Tony had been having Jarvis control the negative news and comments on the internet. Although Lin couldn't be sure how much impact those negative news and comments would have on the Lin symbol, which was embraced by the public, it would definitely affect the daily output of Faith Power. And Tony had bought him a week's time. Jarvis, as usual. "No need." Lin interrupted Tony and said to him, "It's enough. Lin. They want to destroy the Lin symbol. They want to destroy you." "I know." Lin nodded and smiled at Tony. "That Lin symbol was established under the guidance of the shadowy forces. It was never the real me, and it will eventually be destroyed." Tony's expression was conflicted, and then he let out a heavy sigh. In the online world, what humans love to do most is elevate someone to the heavens and then destroy them. He had experienced this himself, during the period when he became decadent due to palladium poisoning. Thanks for watching.